Tonight, under a blood-red moon, disgraced wolf Lyra Voss will face her greatest humiliation, or ignite a revolution that destroys everything her pack believes in. Rejected, bondless, stripped of honor, she stands on sacred ground where cruel truths hide beneath ancient rituals. But when the feared northern king claims her in front of hundreds, something goes catastrophically wrong. A cursed mark burns into her flesh, and Lyra discovers the mating bonds her people worship are nothing but chains of control. This is her story of breaking free, no matter the cost. If you want to see how Lyra burns down the lies and builds something real, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. The stone was cold beneath Lyra's bare feet, and she could feel every goddamn eye on her, hundreds of them. Pack members crowded the circular clearing, their faces lit by torchlight that made their expressions look hungry, eager for the spectacle. The full moon hung overhead like a judge's gavel, ready to fall. Lyra kept her chin up even though her hands trembled at her sides, hidden in the folds of the ceremonial white dress they'd forced her into. White, like she was some kind of virgin sacrifice instead of what she really was, a woman who'd already been gutted and left to bleed out in public once before. "She's got nerve showing up," someone muttered from the crowd. "Nerve or desperation?" another voice answered, followed by low laughter. Lyra didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse. The sacred bonding ground sat at the heart of Greythorn territory, a perfect circle of ancient stones that had witnessed 1,000 matings, 1,000 promises sworn under moonlight. Lyra had been here 3 months ago, standing in this exact spot, wearing a different white dress, her heart full of hope that now felt obscene in its naivety. That night, Cade Morrow, her intended mate, the pack's golden boy, had looked her in the eyes and spoken the words that would haunt her forever. "I reject this bond. I reject Lyra Voss. She is not worthy." The memory still tasted like blood and ash. Now she was back, not because she wanted to be, but because the pack's bonding law was absolute. Any unbonded wolf over 25 had to present themselves at the monthly ritual or be exiled permanently. Lyra was 26. She had no bond and no prospects and no illusions about what would happen tonight. Nobody would claim her. She'd stand here, humiliated, while every eligible male in the pack looked right through her. Then she'd have 30 days to find a bond elsewhere or be cast out into rogue territory, where lone wolves didn't last long. It was a death sentence with extra steps. "Lyra Voss." Elder Moravin's voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a blade. He stood at the north point of the circle, his ceremonial robes making him look more like a vulture than a spiritual leader. "You stand before the pack unbonded and unworthy of your bloodline. Do you accept the terms of the sacred ritual?" Lyra's jaw clenched. "I accept." "Then we begin." Moravin raised his arms, and the crowd fell silent. Let any wolf who would claim this female step forward and declare his intent. Silence. The kind of silence that pressed down on your chest and made it hard to breathe. Lyra stood there, alone in the center of the stone circle, and waited. She counted her heartbeats. 1, 2, 5, 10. The torches crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird called. Nobody moved. "Going once," Moravin intoned, his voice dripping with false solemnity. Lyra caught sight of Cade in the crowd, standing with his new mate, a beautiful blonde wolf named Celine, who'd been Lyra's friend right up until the moment Cade had chosen her instead. They were pressed close together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. The bond mark on Celine's neck gleamed silver in the moonlight, proof of their connection. Lyra felt nothing looking at them. That was the strangest part. 3 months ago, seeing them together had felt like someone was carving her heart out with a dull knife. Now, nothing. Just a cold, empty space where love used to be. "Going twice," Moravin continued. This was it. In another moment, he'd declare her rejected by the pack, and she'd have 30 days to... "I claim her." The voice came from the shadows beyond the torchlight, deep and rough like gravel under boots. Every head in the clearing snapped toward the sound. Lyra's breath caught. A figure stepped into the light, and the crowd rippled backward like a wave retreating from shore. Gasps, whispers, someone whimpered. The man was massive, easily 6'5", with shoulders broad enough to block out the moon. He wore black leather and furs that marked him as northern territory. The frozen reaches, where wolves were said to be more beast than human. His hair was dark, pulled back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and tempered in violence. Scars marked his jaw, his throat, the backs of his hands. But it was his eyes that made Lyra's heart hammer against her ribs. Pale gray, almost silver, and completely devoid of warmth. They fixed on her with the intensity of a predator selecting prey. "Thorn Calith," Morven breathed, and the name sent a fresh wave of shock through the assembly. Lyra knew that name. Every wolf in the Eastern Territories knew it. King Thorn Calith, ruler of the Northern Reaches. A man who'd allegedly killed his own father to take the throne. A man who commanded the most brutal, efficient pack in living memory. A man who hadn't set foot in Greythorn territory in over a decade. "What are you doing here?" Morven demanded, trying to recover his authority and failing. His voice shook. Thorn didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked on Lyra. "I'm claiming my mate. That's how this works, isn't it? You can't just... This is highly irregular. Is there a law that says I can't?" Thorn's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Or are you saying the sacred ritual doesn't apply to outsiders? Because I seem to remember that any wolf of age and standing can participate in any pack's bonding ceremony. Or have the rules changed?" Morven's mouth opened and closed. The old rules, the ancient ones that predated the council, did say exactly that. It was tradition, going back centuries, meant to prevent packs from becoming too insular. "The rules stand," Morven said finally, each word forced out. "If you claim her, you must complete the ritual." "Then let's complete it." Thorn moved forward, crossing the circle in 3 long strides. Lyra stood frozen as he approached. Up close, he was even more intimidating. The scent of him hit her, pine and smoke and something wild that made her wolf stir uneasily beneath her skin. She'd barely felt her wolf in months, not since Cade's rejection, but now it raised its head and paid attention. Thorn stopped directly in front of her, so close she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Do you accept?" His voice was low, meant only for her. "I don't even know you," Lyra whispered. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "You know enough. I'm offering you a way out of this humiliation. Take it or don't, but decide quickly. I don't have patience for hesitation." Lyra's mind raced. This was insane. Bonding with a complete stranger, especially one with Thorn Calith's reputation, could be worse than exile. She'd heard stories about the Northern Reaches, harsh winters, harsher laws, and a king who ruled with absolute authority. But staying here meant living as Greythorn's perpetual outcast, watching Cade and Selene build the life that should have been hers, enduring the whispers and the pity and the slow erosion of her dignity. She'd already lost everything. What was left to risk? "I accept," Lyra said, and her voice didn't shake. Thorn's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Good." He held out his hand. Lyra took it, and the moment their palms touched, a shock of heat raced up her arm. Thorn's fingers closed around hers, firm and calloused and completely certain. Morven cleared his throat. "If both parties consent, we proceed with the marking." He didn't sound happy about it. "King Thorn, you will mark your mate in the traditional manner, and the bond will be sealed under the witness of Moon and Pack." Thorn pulled Lyra closer, his free hand coming up to brush her hair away from her neck. His fingers were surprisingly gentle against her skin. "This will hurt," he murmured. Before Lyra could respond, his canines lengthened and he bent his head to her throat. The bite was sharp and sudden, a white-hot lance of pain that made Lyra gasp. She felt his teeth sink into the vulnerable spot where her neck met her shoulder, felt the warm rush of her own blood, felt... Something broke, not in her body. Deeper than that. In the fabric of reality itself. The pain exploded, transforming from a sharp sting into something catastrophic. It felt like her veins were full of molten metal, like her bones were shattering and reforming, like every cell in her body was being rewritten at the molecular level. Lyra screamed. Thorn jerked back, his eyes wide with something Lyra had never expected to see on his face. Shock. Blood stained his mouth. Her blood. "What?" He started but didn't finish. The mark on Lyra's neck began to burn, not with normal bonding heat, but with something dark and wrong and alive. She clawed at it, felt her own skin slick and hot beneath her fingers. felt something writhing beneath the surface like a living thing trying to break free. "Stop," she choked out. "Stop, something's wrong." The mark pulsed, and a design began to form on her skin. Not the traditional silver crescent of a mating bond, but something black and complex. Geometric patterns that spread like frost across her throat, down her collarbone, intricate and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone cried out. Lyra caught a glimpse of Moravin's face, white with horror. "Abomination," he breathed. The pain intensified and Lyra's vision blurred. She felt her knees buckle, felt Thorn catch her before she hit the stone, felt his arms lock around her like iron bands. "What did you do?" Someone shouted from the crowd. "What kind of dark magic?" "Silence!" Thorn's voice cracked like thunder. He held Lyra against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. To the crowd, he snarled, "Touch her, and I'll paint this ground with your blood." Lyra could barely hear them. The pain was everything, a red wall she couldn't see past, couldn't think past. But beneath the agony, something else was happening. She could feel it, threads of awareness spreading out from the mark, invisible connections that reached into the pack like questing fingers. And what she felt made her want to vomit. Bonds. Hundreds of them, linking wolf to wolf throughout the assembled pack. But they weren't natural. They were constructed, artificial, wrong in a way that made her skin crawl. She could sense the architecture of them, the way they'd been engineered to create dependency, loyalty, control. Cade's bond to Selene, she felt it clearly, and it was a lie. A beautiful, intricate lie, but a lie nonetheless. The silver mark on Selene's neck was a leash disguised as love. "No!" Lyra gasped. "No, they're all fake." "Get her out of here," Moravin commanded. "Remove her from sacred ground before she corrupts." Nobody moves. Thorn's voice was deadly quiet. He shifted Lyra in his arms, rising to his full height with her cradled against him like she weighed nothing. "We're leaving. Anyone who tries to stop us dies." "You can't just take her," Cade said, stepping forward from the crowd. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on Lyra with something that looked almost like fear. "She's Greythorn Pack. She belongs here." Thorn's laugh was harsh. "She belongs here? You rejected her 3 months ago in front of everyone. You don't get to claim her now." "That's not... I didn't..." Cade stammered, glancing at Selene, who stood frozen beside him. "You didn't what? Mean it? Think it through?" Thorn's eyes were merciless. "You humiliated her. You broke whatever she was before tonight. Now she's mine, and I'm taking her home." The mark on Lyra's neck pulsed again, and this time the vision that hit her was clear and devastating. She saw Moravin in a dark room, drawing symbols on parchment, brewing compounds that smelled like copper and bitter herbs. She saw him pressing those concoctions to the necks of young wolves during their bonding ceremonies, saw the marks take hold, saw the false bonds form like chains wrapping around souls. Decades of this. Generations. "You made them," Lyra whispered, her eyes finding Moravin's face. "The bonds. You made them. They're not real." Silence crashed down like a physical force. Moravin's expression went carefully blank. "The girl is delirious from the marking. She doesn't know what she's saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Lyra's voice was getting stronger, fueled by a rage so pure it burned hotter than the pain. "The sacred bonds are a lie. You've been controlling the pack for years, deciding who mates with who, engineering bloodlines, creating loyalty that isn't real." "Enough!" Moravin's mask slipped, showing the fury beneath. "You will be silent, or I will..." "You'll what?" Thorn challenged. "Threaten her? Attack her? Go ahead and try." He looked at the assembled pack, his expression contemptuous. "She's telling the truth, and you all know it. You've felt it, haven't you? The wrongness, the way your bonds feel like obligations instead of choices, the way you can't remember falling in love, just waking up one day with a mark on your neck and a stranger in your bed." Several wolves in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Lyra saw doubt flowering on their faces, saw hands rising unconsciously to touch their bond marks. "Lies," Moravin spat. "Northern savagery and lies. The bonds are sacred, blessed by, By who?" Lyra interrupted. Her vision was clearing now, the pain receding to a dull roar. The black mark on her neck still pulsed, but it felt different now. Not like a curse. Like a key, unlocking doors she'd never known existed. Blessed by you, by the council? How convenient that you're the ones who administer the rituals. How convenient that you're the ones who decide which wolves are compatible. Cade's face had gone gray. Celine? He turned to his mate, something desperate in his voice. We're real, right? We chose each other. Celine didn't answer. She was staring at Lyra with horror and something that looked like recognition. Did we choose? Celine whispered. Cade, did we actually choose, or did they just tell us we were meant to be together, and we believed them? Don't listen to her! Moravin's voice rose to a shout. She bears a curse mark, a corruption. Everything she says is poisoned. Then explain it. Thorn's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Explain why a standard bonding ritual produced that mark. Explain why she can suddenly see the structure of every bond in this clearing. Explain why she's threatening everything you've built. Moravin's jaw worked. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he drew himself up, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. By the power vested in me as High Elder of Greythorn Pack, I declare Lyra Voss corrupted and dangerous to Pack stability. She is exiled, effective immediately. Any wolf who aids her will share her fate. You can't, someone started. I can and I have. Moravin's eyes were chips of ice. Take her and leave, Northern King. Take your corrupted mate and never return. If either of you sets foot in Greythorn territory again, it will be considered an act of war. Thorn smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Careful, old man. You're making threats you can't back up. Try me. The air between them crackled with violence, two alphas on the edge of bloodshed. Lyra could feel Thorn's muscles coiling beneath her, preparing for a fight that would turn the clearing into a slaughterhouse. Don't, she said quietly, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. Don't give them the excuse. Let's just go. Thorn looked down at her, and something in his expression softened fractionally. You're sure? I'm sure. Lyra met his eyes. I don't want to stay here. I don't want any part of this place anymore. He nodded once, sharp. Then he turned his back on the assembled pack, a calculated insult that made several wolves growl, and carried Lyra toward the tree line. Nobody stopped them. As they reached the edge of the clearing, Lyra looked back over Thorn's shoulder. She saw Cade standing frozen, saw Celine with tears streaming down her face, saw Moravin watching them leave with murder in his eyes. She saw the pack she'd been born into, the wolves she'd grown up with, the home that had never really been hers. Good riddance, she whispered. Thorn carried her into the forest, moving with the silent efficiency of a predator. The sounds of the clearing faded behind them. Angry voices, accusations, the beginning of what Lyra suspected would be a very long, very difficult conversation among the pack. After several minutes of silence, Thorn spoke. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Lyra's entire body ached, the black mark still burning against her skin. What happens now? Now, we get you somewhere safe while we figure out what the hell that mark is and why it's showing you things you shouldn't be able to see. You believe me? About the bonds? Thorn's laugh was bitter. I've suspected something like this for years. The way the Southern Packs operate, the strange uniformity of their loyalties, the way dissent gets stamped out through incompatibility and convenient exile. I just never had proof. He glanced down at her. Until now. Lyra felt something twist in her chest. You didn't claim me to save me from humiliation, did you? You claimed me because you needed proof. I claimed you for multiple reasons, Thorn said, his voice carefully neutral. Saving you from humiliation was one. Getting proof of the council's corruption was another, but mostly, he paused, his jaw tightening. Mostly I claimed you because when I saw you standing there alone in that circle, taking their judgment without breaking, I thought, there's a wolf worth having. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Lyra didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They walked in silence through the dark forest, Thorn navigating by moonlight and instinct. Eventually, they reached a small clearing where several wolves in northern furs waited with horses. My lord, one of them said, bowing. Is she? She's fine, Thorn cut him off. Or she will be. Mount up. We're riding hard for the border. He set Lyra on her feet, steadying her when she swayed. The pain had dulled to a persistent throb, but exhaustion was setting in, dragging at her bones. One of the northern wolves, a woman with short dark hair and sharp eyes, brought forward a horse and a heavy cloak. "For the lady," she said, offering them to Lyra. Lyra wrapped the cloak around herself, grateful for the warmth. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." The woman's smile was wry. "Wait until you see what winter in the Reaches is like." Thorn swung onto his horse with easy grace, then extended a hand down to Lyra. "Can you ride?" "Yes." Lyra took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She settled against his back, her arms wrapping around his waist to keep from falling. "Hold tight," Thorn said. "We're not stopping until we cross into safe territory." He kicked the horse into motion, and they plunged into the night. As they rode, Lyra felt the black mark pulse against her skin in rhythm with the horse's hoofbeats. Each pulse brought new sensations, threads of awareness spreading out into the darkness, connecting her to something vast and ancient that she didn't understand. The bonds weren't just fake, they were blocking something, something that should have been there all along, something that was waking up inside her now, wild and powerful and completely beyond her control. Lyra pressed her face against Thorn's back and tried not to think about what would happen when whatever was inside her finally broke free. But she couldn't stop the images that flickered through her mind. Moravin's face when she'd spoken the truth, the doubt spreading through the crowd, the way Cade had looked at Celine like he was seeing a stranger. She'd shattered something tonight, some fundamental lie that the pack had been built on, and she had no idea what would rise from the wreckage. "Thorn," she said quietly, speaking against the leather of his jacket. "What if I'm dangerous? What if this mark makes me something I can't control?" His hand came down to cover hers where they rested against his stomach. His fingers were warm and strong. "Then we'll figure it out," he said simply. "Together." It wasn't a promise of safety. It wasn't even a promise of survival. But it was something. Lyra closed her eyes and held on as they raced through the darkness, leaving Greythorn territory and everything she'd ever known behind. The mark burned. And in the distance, like an echo of something terrible approaching, she heard the first howls of pursuit. Moravin has sent hunters after them. Lyra's transformation is accelerating, and Thorn is about to discover that the woman he claimed is far more dangerous and far more valuable than he ever imagined. Will they make it to the northern reaches alive? And what will Lyra become when the mark completes its work? The howls came closer. Lyra tightened her grip around Thorn's waist as their horse plunged through undergrowth, branches whipping past in the darkness. Behind them, maybe half a mile back, she could hear the pursuit, at least a dozen wolves, maybe more, their hunting cries echoing through the forest like promises of violence. "How many did he send?" she called over the thunder of hooves. "Enough to make a point." Thorn's voice was steady, but she felt the tension in his body, coiled and ready. "Moravin wants you dead before you can talk, before you can spread what you know." The mark on Lyra's neck pulsed, hot and insistent, and with each pulse came another flash of awareness. She could feel the hunters behind them, sense the false bonds linking them to Moravin like strings on puppets, could feel how those bonds made them loyal beyond reason, beyond self-preservation. They'd die trying to kill her if that's what their alpha commanded. "They won't stop," Lyra said, and it wasn't a question. "No, they won't." One of Thorn's wolves, a lean man with a scar across his temple, pulled his horse alongside them. "My lord, we can't outrun them to the border, not with two to a horse." "I know." Thorn's jaw clenched. "Kale, take Mira and circle back. Slow them down. Don't engage unless you have to." "Understood." Kale dropped back, whistling sharp. The dark-haired woman who'd given Lyra the cloak peeled off with him, and they disappeared into the shadows. Lyra twisted to watch them go. "You're splitting your forces." "I'm buying us time." Thorn urged the horse faster. "We just need to make it past Crow's Ridge. Once we're over the boundary, Moravin's hunters will have to turn back or risk a territorial violation." "And if they don't care about violations? Then we'll paint the forest red." His voice held no bravado, just cold certainty. "But I'd rather avoid that. My wolves are outnumbered." Guilt twisted in Lyra's stomach. These people were risking their lives for her, a stranger, a woman their king had claimed on impulse for reasons she still didn't fully understand. The mark pulsed again, harder this time, and Lyra gasped as pain lanced through her skull. Images flooded her mind. Moravin in that dark room again, but this time she saw more. saw him meeting with others, wolves in fine clothes who bore the insignia of different packs. A council. All of them working together, coordinating, controlling their territories through the false bonds. "It's bigger than Greythorn," she whispered. "Thorn, it's not just Moravin. There's a whole network of them, elders across multiple packs, all doing the same thing." The horse stumbled, and Thorn cursed, hauling on the reins. They'd reached rougher terrain, rocky and steep. Behind them, the howls were getting closer, too close. "We're not going to make it, are we?" Lyra said quietly. Thorn didn't answer immediately. Then, "Hold on." He veered sharply left, away from the direct path to the border, heading instead toward a darker part of the forest, where the trees grew thick and ancient. Lyra recognized this area from old pack stories, the Whispering Hollows, a place where the roots grew so dense that horses couldn't pass. "What are you doing?" "Evening the odds." Thorn pulled the horse to a stop in a small clearing ringed by massive oaks. He dismounted in one smooth motion, then reached up to lift Lyra down. "Can you run?" Lyra's legs were shaky, her whole body still thrumming with pain from the mark, but she nodded. "Yes." "Good." Thorn pulled a long knife from his belt and pressed it into her hand. "Stay behind me. If anyone gets past me, you cut them. Throat or belly, doesn't matter which. Understand?" The weight of the blade was foreign in her palm. Lyra had never killed anyone, had never even fought outside of training exercises. "I said, do you understand?" Thorn's eyes locked on hers, pale and merciless in the moonlight. "Yes." Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "I understand. That's my girl." He turned away before she could parse the strange flutter those words caused in her chest, drawing his own blade, a wicked thing, half sword, half cleaver. "Now get ready. They're here." The first hunter burst into the clearing 3 seconds later. He was young, maybe 20, with Greythorn's brown and gold coloring. His eyes were wild, fixed on Lyra with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The bond mark on his neck glowed faintly silver. "There!" he shouted back toward the others. "I found the corrupted one." Thorn moved. One moment he was standing still, the next he was a blur of violence. His blade caught the young hunter across the chest, not deep enough to kill, but enough to send him stumbling back with a scream. "Run back to Moravin," Thorn said, his voice conversational. "Tell him I claimed her fairly. Tell him if he wants her, he'll have to go through me." The hunter didn't run. His hand went to the wound, came away bloody, and something in his face shifted. The wildness faded, replaced by cold focus. "You don't understand," the hunter said. "She's dangerous. The mark on her neck, it's forbidden. Ancient. It could destroy everything we've built." "Good," Thorn said flatly. "What you've built deserves to be destroyed." 3 more hunters appeared at the clearing's edge, then 2 more. 6 total, all bearing Greythorn marks, all with that same fevered loyalty burning in their eyes. Lyra's mark pulsed, and she felt it clearly, the threads connecting these wolves to Moravin, Trupwawan, to the false bond system, making them into extensions of his will rather than independent beings. They'd die for him. Gladly. "Last chance," Thorn said, addressing all of them. "Leave now, or I start killing." "We can't." A woman with red hair stepped forward, her voice almost apologetic. "You don't know what she is, what she could become. The Elder showed us the old texts. That mark, it's the Unmaker's curse. She'll destroy every bond in existence if she lives." "The Unmaker's curse," Lyra repeated slowly. The words resonated somewhere deep, like she'd heard them before in a half-remembered dream. "What is that?" "Don't listen to her lies," the red-haired woman said, but she was looking at Thorn, not Lyra. "Please, we don't want to fight you. Just give her to us. Let us finish this before it's too late." Thorn's laugh was harsh. "You really believe that? You think I'm going to hand over my mate because your puppet master fed you some story about ancient curses? It's not a story. The texts are real." "All right. I don't give a fuck about the texts." Thorn's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. "Here's what I know. Your elder has been controlling your pack for decades through false bonds. This woman threatened to expose him. Now he's sent you to kill her while spinning some tale about curses and danger, and you're too bound to him to see you're being used." Doubt flickered across several faces. The young hunter Thorn had cut looked uncertain, his hand still pressed to his bleeding chest. But the red-haired woman's expression hardened. "You're wrong. The bonds are sacred. They keep us stable, unified, strong. Without them, we'd tear ourselves apart." "Without them, you'd be free," Lyra said quietly. The woman's eyes snapped to her. "Free to do what? Destroy each other? Descend into chaos?" "The bonds are necessary. The bonds are chains." Lyra took a step forward, ignoring Thorn's warning growl. The mark on her neck flared hot, and words came to her lips that she didn't consciously choose. "You're defending a prison because it's the only home you've ever known. But deep down, you feel it, don't you? The wrongness. The way your bond doesn't quite fit. The way you can't remember choosing your mate, just waking up one day marked and being told it was meant to be." The red-haired woman's face went white. "Shut up. You don't even like him, do you?" Lyra's voice was gentle, but the words cut like knives. "You're bonded. You tolerate him. You perform the role of devoted mate because that's what you're supposed to do. But you've never loved him. Not really. The bond won't let you love anyone else, but it can't make you love him either. It just traps you in between." "I said shut up!" The woman lunged forward, claws extending. Thorn intercepted her mid-leap, his blade flashing. Blood sprayed. The woman hit the ground hard, clutching her arm where Thorn had opened it from shoulder to elbow. "Next one dies," Thorn said calmly. The other hunters shifted, uncertain. The young one was backing away slowly, his eyes wide. Two others looked ready to bolt. But one, a massive man with gray threading his beard, stepped forward with grim determination. "For the pack," he said, and charged. What followed was brutal and efficient. Thorn met the charge head-on, his blade work economical and vicious. He moved like violence personified, every motion designed to disable or kill. The big man went down with a scream, his leg open to the bone. Another hunter tried to flank Thorn and took the pommel of his sword to the temple, dropping like a stone. Lyra watched, gripping her own knife so hard her knuckles went white. The remaining hunters circled, looking for an opening, and she realized with cold clarity that they were trying to separate her from Thorn. One of them met her eyes. A woman, younger than Lyra, with fear and determination warring in her expression. She broke from the circle, sprinting directly at Lyra with inhuman speed. Lyra's body moved on instinct. She dropped low as the hunter's claws raked the air where her head had been, then drove her knife upward into the woman's exposed side. The blade sank in deep. The hunter's eyes went wide with shock. She stumbled back, hand clutching the wound, blood pouring between her fingers. "I'm sorry," Lyra whispered. The hunter collapsed. Lyra stood frozen, staring at the blood on her hands, the knife slick and red in her grip. She'd never actually— "Lyra!" Thorn's shout snapped her back to the moment. The remaining hunters were retreating, dragging their wounded with them. The red-haired woman was shouting something about regrouping, about getting reinforcements, about how the Northern King had just declared war on Greythorn. Then they were gone, crashing back through the underbrush, leaving only blood and the groaning wounded behind. Thorn was at Lyra's side in an instant, his hands on her shoulders, his face close to hers. "Are you hurt?" "I killed her." Lyra's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "I killed that woman." "You defended yourself." Thorn's grip tightened. "Look at me. Lyra, look at me." She dragged her eyes up to his face. "You did what you had to do," Thorn said, his voice firm. "She would have killed you without hesitation. You survived. That's what matters." "I can still feel her," Lyra whispered, "through the mark. I felt her bond break when she died. Felt the thread snap. She had a mate. Children. They're going to feel it too when the bond just ends." Thorn's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. "That's not your fault, isn't it?" Before he could answer, Kael and Mira emerged from the trees, both spattered with blood that clearly wasn't their own. "We delayed them as long as we could," Kael reported, "but there's more coming. At least 20, maybe 30. Moravin's called in wolves from the outer territories." Thorn cursed. "How long do we have?" "An hour, maybe less. Then we move. Now." Thorn looked at the wounded hunter, still groaning on the ground. The big man whose leg he'd opened. "Leave him. He'll live if his pack gets here in time. They mounted quickly, but this time Thorn put Lyra on a separate horse with Mira. You need to ride faster than we could together, he explained. Mira's the best rider. She'll get you to the border. What about you? I'll be right behind you. His eyes held hers. Trust me. Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to demand he come with them, but the mark pulsed, and she felt the approaching hunters like a wave of hostile intent rolling toward them through the forest. Go, Thorn commanded. Mira kicked her horse into motion, and Lyra had to grab hold of her waist to keep from falling off. They plunged back into the darkness, leaving Thorn and Kale behind. He'll be fine, Mira said over her shoulder. The king doesn't die easy. Lyra didn't answer. She was too focused on the sensations flooding through the mark, the approaching hunters, yes, but also something else, something deeper and more disturbing. The mark was changing her. She could feel it altering her perception, expanding her awareness until she could sense wolves miles away, feel the structure of their bonds, understand the invisible architecture of control that webbed across the entire territory. And beneath it all, something was waking up, something old and powerful that had been sleeping in her bloodline for generations, waiting for the right trigger. The Unmaker's curse. Was that what this was? Some kind of ancient power designed to destroy bonds? The forest opened up ahead, and Lyra saw the ridgeline that marked the border between Greythorn and Northern Territories. Almost there. Almost safe. Then Mira's horse screamed and went down hard. They hit the ground in a tangle of limbs and thrashing hooves. Lyra rolled clear, gasping, her whole body lit up with pain. Mira wasn't as lucky. She'd landed wrong, her leg trapped beneath the fallen horse. Go! Mira shouted, her face white with pain. Don't stop for me. Shadows moved at the edge of the clearing. Not hunters. Worse. Morven himself stepped into view, flanked by 6 wolves in elder robes. Behind them, at least 40 more hunters waited, a small army mobilized for one purpose: to kill Lyra Voss before she could spread the truth. Lyra scrambled to her feet, pulling her bloody knife from her belt. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The mark burned like a brand. There's nowhere left to run, child, Morven said, his voice carrying that same false kindness he'd always used. Your corruption ends here. Lyra backed toward the ridgeline, toward the border that was so close she could almost touch it. You're the corruption. You and your council. How many lives have you destroyed? How many wolves have you trapped in bonds they never chose? We brought order to chaos, Morven said. We created stability where there was only violence. The old ways, wolves choosing their own mates, following their base instincts, it led to nothing but bloodshed and fractured packs. We fixed that. You enslaved them. We saved them. Morven's mask cracked, showing the zealot beneath. Do you have any idea what it was like before the bonds? Packs tearing themselves apart over mating disputes. Alphas killing each other for breeding rights. Children born to parents who couldn't stand each other. We ended all of that. We created a system where every wolf has a perfect mate, where loyalty is guaranteed, where the pack comes before individual desire. Where you control everything, Lyra shot back. Where no one questions your authority because their bonds won't let them. Exactly. Morven's smile was serene. And it's worked beautifully for 3 generations. Until you. The elders were spreading out, forming a circle around her. Lyra's back hit empty air. She'd reached the edge of the ridge. Behind her was a steep drop into Northern Territory. Safety, if she could survive the fall. That mark on your neck, Morven continued, moving closer. Do you know what it really is? The texts call it the Unmaker's brand. It appears once every few centuries, always on a wolf with the old bloodlines. Bloodlines we've been very careful to dilute and control. Why? Lyra demanded. What am I supposed to unmake? Everything. Moravin's expression was almost pitiful. If you fully awaken, you'll be able to sever bonds with a thought. Every bond within your range, hundreds, maybe thousands of wolves, suddenly free. Suddenly confused and angry and demanding answers we can't give. The packs would collapse into chaos. Everything we've built would burn. Good, Lyra said, echoing Thorn's earlier words. Let it burn. I can't allow that. Morven nodded to his wolves. Take her, alive if possible, dead if necessary. The elders closed in. Lyra raised her knife, knowing it was futile. 6 trained elders against 1 exhausted, injured woman. The math didn't work, but the mark had other ideas. As the first elder reached for her, the mark flared white-hot, and power exploded outward from Lyra's body like a shockwave. She felt it tear through the elder's bonds, felt the threads connecting them to Morven fray and snap, felt decades of false loyalty shatter in an instant. The elders stumbled back, gasping, clutching at their necks where their bond marks had gone dark and cold. "What?" one of them started. "What did you do to us?" another demanded, but he was looking at Morven now, not Lyra. And his expression was no longer reverent, it was furious. "You felt it, didn't you?" Lyra's voice carried across the clearing. "The moment your bonds broke, the way everything suddenly came into focus, all the doubts you've been suppressing, all the questions you weren't allowed to ask, they're all there now. You can finally see what he did to you." "Silence her," Morven shouted, but his voice had lost its power. The elders weren't moving to obey. One of them, an older woman with white hair, was staring at her hands like they belonged to a stranger. "How long?" she whispered. "How long have I been bound?" 30 years, Morven said quickly. 30 years of loyal service to the pack. 30 years stolen. The woman's eyes lifted to Morven's face, and they were full of tears. "I had a daughter. Before the bond. I remember her now. I gave her up because you said my bonded couldn't raise another man's child. I gave up my daughter because the bond made me believe that was right. It was necessary. You took my child." The woman's grief transformed into rage. She lunged at Morven, claws extended. Chaos erupted. The other freed elders turned on Morven, decades of suppressed autonomy exploding into violence. The hunters behind them wavered, confused, their bonds still intact, but their leaders suddenly in open revolt. Lyra didn't wait to see how it played out. She grabbed Mira, who'd managed to drag herself free of the fallen horse, and pulled her toward the ridge. "Can you walk?" "Not well, but I can hop." Mira's face was tight with pain, but she managed to grin. "That was insane, what you just did." "I don't even know what I did." "You freed them. I felt it too, like a pressure I didn't know was there suddenly lifted." Behind them, Morven was screaming orders that no one was following. Two of the elders had him pinned. The hunters were scattering, some running toward the fight, others fleeing into the forest. Then Thorn and Kael burst into the clearing from the opposite side, weapons drawn, ready for a battle that was already over. Thorn took in the scene, the fighting elders, the scattered hunters. Lyra standing at the ridge's edge, with power still crackling around her like lightning, and his expression shifted into something that might have been awe. "Lyra," he called, "what did you do?" "I broke them," she said simply. "Their bonds. I broke all of them." "Can you control it?" "I don't know." And that was the terrifying truth. The power had erupted from her without conscious direction, responding to threat but not to will. "Thorn, I don't know what I am." He crossed to her in long strides, stepping over the wounded and the fighting without care. When he reached her, his hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "What you are," he said clearly, "is exactly what we need. The Council has been operating in shadows for generations. You're the light that's going to burn them out." "I'm dangerous." "Yes." He didn't deny it. "You're dangerous as hell, but you're also the only chance these wolves have at real freedom." Lyra wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she could control this power, use it for good instead of destruction. But the mark was still burning, still pulling at something deep inside her, and she could feel it wasn't done. This was just the beginning. Whatever she was becoming, it was bigger than breaking a few bonds in one clearing. It was bigger than Greythorn. It might be bigger than she could survive. "We need to move," Kael said urgently. He was standing guard, watching the chaos with wary eyes. "Before they regroup." "Agreed." Thorn kept one arm around Lyra, supporting her weight. "Can you ride?" "I think so." They found horses, spooked but still close enough to catch, and mounted quickly. Mira rode double with Kael, her injured leg bound with torn cloth. As they prepared to cross into northern territory, Lyra looked back one last time. Morven was on his knees now, surrounded by wolves who'd once served him. The fury in their eyes was terrible to behold. Whatever happened next, his reign was over. But how many others like him were out there? How many other elders in other packs, all running the same con? The thought made her sick. "Don't look back," Thorn said quietly. There's nothing for you there anymore. He was right. Greythorn was her past, a past built on lies and false bonds. Whatever came next would have to be different. They crossed the border as dawn broke over the ridge, and Lyra felt the shift immediately. Northern territory had a different quality to the air, colder and cleaner, like it hadn't been touched by the corruption that saturated the south. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. As they rode, the mark on Lyra's neck began to pulse in a new rhythm. Not painful, but insistent, like it was trying to tell her something. She reached up to touch it and felt heat radiating from the black designs. "Thorn," she said slowly. "How far are we from your capital?" 2 days hard ride. Why?" "Because something's pulling me there." Lyra couldn't explain it better than that. The mark was tugging her north toward whatever waited in the heart of the frozen reaches. "It wants me to go home, to your home." Thorn's expression was unreadable. "Then that's where we'll go. But fair warning, the reaches aren't like the southern territories. It's harsh land that breeds harsh wolves. My people don't trust outsiders, and they definitely won't trust a woman bearing a mark they've only seen in old horror stories." "What do those stories say?" His jaw tightened. "That the Unmaker comes in times of great corruption, that she tears down false structures to make room for truth, and that she usually burns herself out in the process." "Burns herself out?" Lyra tasted the words. "You mean dies?" "The stories aren't specific about the ending." Thorn's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through her own. "But I'm not letting it end that way. Whatever this power is, we're going to find a way for you to master it instead of being consumed by it." "Why?" The question burst out before Lyra could stop it. "Why do you care? You don't know me. You claimed me for political reasons, to get proof against the council. So why are you acting like..." She couldn't finish. Couldn't articulate the strange intimacy that had developed between them, the way he touched her like she belonged to him, the way she'd started to rely on his presence like an anchor in the storm. "Like you matter?" Thorn finished for her. His eyes were very pale in the dawn light. "Because you do. And not just because of what you represent or what you can do to the council." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "When I saw you in that circle, Lyra, standing there taking their judgment without breaking, I recognized something. A strength that doesn't come from bonds or false loyalty. The kind of strength that's forged in isolation and pain. I have that too. It's why I rule the way I do, alone, without a mate, trusting no one completely." But seeing you made me wonder if that isolation was necessity or choice." His hand tightened on hers. "Made me wonder if maybe I've been alone so long I forgot there was another option." Lyra's breath caught. "Thorn!" "Don't!" He released her hand abruptly. "Don't say anything yet. Right now you're in shock, running on adrenaline and fear. You don't know what you want. Once we get to the capital, once you're safe and you've had time to think, then we can talk about what this is between us." The dismissal stung, even though his logic made sense. Lyra was exhausted, traumatized, her entire world shattered and rebuilt in the span of a few hours. She didn't trust her own emotions right now. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher, leaving Greythorn and its blood-soaked clearing farther behind with each mile. But Lyra could still feel the threads. The bonds she'd broken pulsed in her awareness like phantom limbs, and beyond them, she sensed thousands more. A vast network of false connections spreading across the territories, all of them waiting to be severed. All of them connected to elders who would kill her the moment they realized what she could do. "Thorn," she said quietly, "this is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was grim. "Yes. Once word spreads about what happened at Greythorn, every corrupted elder in every pack is going to see you as an existential threat. They'll come for you with everything they have." "So what do we do?" "We get you somewhere safe. We train you to control your power. And then," his expression hardened into something ruthless and determined, "then we burn the whole corrupt system to the ground and build something better from the ashes." It should have sounded insane. Impossible. 2 wolves against an entrenched power structure that spanned multiple territories and generations. But the mark pulsed warm against Lyra's skin, and she felt the truth of it settling into her bones. This was her purpose. The reason she'd been rejected, humiliated, pushed to the edge, until the old bloodline in her veins woke up and remembered what it was. She was the unmaker, and she was going to tear down every false bond in existence, no matter what. The frozen reaches earned their name. 2 days of hard riding through progressively colder terrain brought them to the heart of Northern Territory, where snow clung to the ground even in late spring and the wind cut like knives. Lyra had never felt cold like this. It seeped through the heavy furs Thorn's wolves had given her, settling into her bones until her teeth chattered and her fingers went numb. But the cold was nothing compared to the reception waiting for them. Thorn's capital wasn't a city in the southern sense. It was a fortress carved into the mountainside, all black stone and sharp angles, built to withstand sieges and winter storms that could kill in hours. Guards lined the walls, their faces hard and suspicious as Thorn's party approached. "Home sweet home," Mira muttered from where she rode beside Lyra, her injured leg bound tight. "Try not to look too southern, they'll eat you alive." Lyra didn't have the energy to ask what that meant. The mark on her neck had been burning steadily hotter the closer they got to the capital, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat, pulling her forward with an insistence that bordered on painful. The massive gates opened as they approached, and Thorn led them into a courtyard where at least 50 wolves waited in formation. All of them wore the black and gray of northern warriors. All of them looked like they could kill without breaking a sweat. And all of them were staring at Lyra with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Thorn dismounted and turned to help Lyra down. His hands were steady on her waist, his face carefully neutral, but she felt the tension in him. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "Don't speak unless spoken to. These wolves respect strength, and they despise weakness. You show fear, they'll rip you apart." "Comforting," Lyra muttered, but she straightened her spine and lifted her chin as Thorn led her toward the assembled warriors. A woman stepped forward from the group, tall and powerfully built, with white blonde hair braided back from a face that looked like it had been carved from ice. She wore leather armor decorated with silver wolf heads, and when she moved, every warrior in the courtyard shifted to attention. "My king," the woman said, her voice carrying across the space. "You return with an interesting prize." "Commander Astrid." Thorn's tone was formal, official. "May I present Lyra Voss, formerly of Greythorn Pack, my bonded mate." The words sent a ripple through the assembled wolves. Lyra felt their stares intensify, felt them evaluating her, judging her, finding her wanting. Astrid's pale eyes fixed on Lyra with predatory focus. "Your mate? How unexpected! I wasn't aware you were seeking a bond, my lord." "I wasn't." Thorn's hand settled on the small of Lyra's back, possessive and warm through the furs. "It happened quickly." "Clearly." Astrid moved closer, circling them like a wolf examining wounded prey. "And this mark she bears? The one that's making half my soldiers reach for their weapons?" Lyra's hand went instinctively to her neck, covering the black designs that had spread down to her collarbone. The mark pulsed hot beneath her palm. "It's complicated," Thorn said. "Then uncomplicate it." Astrid stopped directly in front of Lyra, close enough that Lyra could see the scars on her face, the cold calculation in her eyes. "You bring a southern wolf bearing forbidden markings into our territory without warning, without explanation. That requires answers, my king." The emphasis on "my king" was slight but pointed, a reminder that even Thorn had to answer to someone. "The Council has been engineering bonds," Thorn said bluntly, "using false magic to control mating connections, bloodlines, pack loyalty. Lyra's mark allows her to sense these false bonds, to break them." Silence crashed down like a physical force. Astrid's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. I witnessed it myself at Greythorn. She severed the bonds of 6 elders simultaneously, freed them from decades of control." Thorn's voice was firm, confident. "This is what we've suspected for years. Now we have proof." "Proof." Astrid's gaze never left Lyra's face. "Or a convenient story to explain why you claimed an unbonded outcast and brought her home wearing a curse mark." Heat flooded Lyra's cheeks. "It's not a curse." "Did I give you permission to speak?" Astrid's voice cracked like a whip. Lyra's mouth snapped shut. The mark on her neck flared hot, and for a moment she felt the threads of bonds webbing through the courtyard. Dozens of them, connecting wolf to wolf, and they felt wrong in a way that made her skin crawl. "Commander," Thorn said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "you will show my mate the respect her position demands." "Of course, my king." Astrid stepped back, but her eyes stayed cold. "Forgive my rudeness. It's been a long winter, and we've had reports of trouble in the southern territories. Attacks, instability. Now you arrive with a southern wolf bearing markings from old horror stories, claiming she can destroy bonds. You must understand my concern." "I understand you're questioning my judgment. I'm questioning the timing." Astrid's voice was carefully measured. "And I'm not alone. Your council will want answers, proper answers, not rushed explanations in a courtyard." Thorn's jaw clenched. "Then arrange a council meeting tomorrow night. I'll explain everything." "As you wish." Astrid bowed, the gesture technically correct but somehow mocking. "In the meantime, I'll have quarters prepared for your mate, somewhere secure." The way she said secure made it sound like imprisoned. "She stays with me," Thorn said flatly. Astrid's eyebrows rose fractionally. "My king, propriety. I don't give a damn about propriety. She's my mate. She stays with me, in my quarters, under my protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Several warriors shifted uncomfortably. Astrid's smile was thin. "Of course. Your quarters. How traditional." She turned and walked away, and the assembled warriors dispersed with her, leaving Lyra and Thorn standing alone in the courtyard with Kael and Mira. "Well," Mira said cheerfully, "that went great. I especially liked the part where Astrid looked at Lyra like she wanted to skin her and use her pelt as a rug." "Astrid's protective," Thorn said, but his voice was tight. "She doesn't trust outsiders." "She doesn't trust anything," Kael corrected, "including you, apparently." Thorn didn't argue. He took Lyra's arm and led her toward the fortress proper, upstairs carved from black stone, through corridors lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. They passed other wolves, servants, warriors, advisors, and all of them stopped to stare at Lyra with varying degrees of suspicion and hostility. By the time they reached Thorn's quarters, Lyra felt like she'd been flayed alive by their collective judgment. Thorn's rooms were sparse but functional. A large bedroom dominated by a massive bed covered in furs, a sitting area with a fireplace that was already blazing, a balcony that looked out over the frozen landscape. "It's not much," Thorn said, closing the door behind them, "but it's private, safe." Lyra moved to the fireplace, desperate for warmth. "Your commander hates me." "Astrid doesn't hate you. She's cautious. It's her job to be cautious." "She thinks I'm a threat." "You are a threat." Thorn poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter. "To the old order, to the council's control, to everything they've built their power on. Of course she's wary. That doesn't mean she's wrong to be." He handed Lyra a glass. She took it, grateful for the warmth, and drank. The liquid burned going down, but it helped chase away the cold. "Thorn," she said quietly, "your people have bonds too. I felt them in the courtyard. If what I can do spreads here, our bonds are different." Thorn's voice was firm. "We don't use the council's methods. Northern bonds are chosen freely, marked honestly. There's no magic involved beyond the natural connection between compatible wolves." Lyra wanted to believe him, but the mark on her neck was still pulsing, still insisting something was wrong, and she'd learned to trust that instinct. "How can you be sure?" "Because I've lived here my whole life. I know my wolves, know how our bonds form. It's nothing like what you described at Greythorn." He sounded so certain, so absolutely convinced. Lyra took another drink and tried to ignore the doubt coiling in her stomach. They ate dinner in his quarters, hot stew and dark bread that tasted better than anything Lyra had eaten in days. Thorn was quieter than usual, his mind clearly elsewhere, probably on the council meeting tomorrow night. "What will they ask?" Lyra said, breaking the silence. "Everything. Your background, your bloodline, how the mark appeared, what you can do with it." Thorn set down his spoon. "They'll want proof. They'll want to see you break a bond." "I don't know if I can do it on command. It just happens when I'm threatened." "Then we'll have to hope they don't push you that far." His expression was grim. "Some of them will want you gone, exiled or killed, Astrid probably among them. Why did you bring me here if you knew they'd react like this?" Because the alternative was leaving you in the south to be hunted by every corrupted elder with something to lose. Thorn's eyes met hers. Here, at least, you have a chance. My protection means something, not enough to override the council entirely, but enough to buy us time. Time for what? To prove you're not a threat to legitimate bonds, to show them you can control your power, to build support among wolves who want the truth exposed as much as we do. It sounded reasonable, logical, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap with their eyes wide open. She slept badly that night, plagued by dreams of threads and bonds and wolves with silver eyes who watched her from the shadows. When she woke, Thorn was already gone, leaving a note saying he had council business to attend to before the formal meeting. Mira arrived with breakfast and clean clothes, northern style, all dark leather and fur trim. You'll freeze in southern fabrics, Mira explained, helping Lyra dress. And you want to look like you belong here, not like some lost lamb. I am a lost lamb. Then fake it until you're not. Mira's smile was wry. First rule of survival in the Reaches, never let them see weakness. Second rule, trust no one completely. Third rule, always have an escape route. Comforting life philosophy. It's kept me alive this long. Mira finished lacing Lyra's vest and stepped back. There, you look almost dangerous. Almost? Well, you're still too pretty. Northern wolves prefer scarred and scary, but we'll work on it. Despite everything, Lyra found herself laughing. The day passed slowly. Lyra wasn't allowed to leave Thorn's quarters without escort, so she spent hours pacing the rooms like a caged animal, feeling the mark on her neck pulse with increasing urgency. Something was wrong. The mark kept insisting, kept pulling her attention toward something she couldn't identify. When Thorn returned that evening to prepare for the council meeting, Lyra grabbed his arm before he could speak. I need to tell you something. The mark, it's been warning me all day. Something's wrong here. Lyra, not now. Thorn gently removed her hand. I know you're nervous about the meeting, but we need to focus. This isn't nerves. Listen to me. The bonds here, they feel wrong. Not all of them, but enough that... Enough! Thorn's voice was sharp. You're letting fear cloud your judgment. Our bonds are clean. I've told you this. But what if you're wrong? What if the corruption spread farther than you think? I'm not wrong. He turned away, adjusting his formal jacket. And you bringing this up in front of the council will only confirm their worst fears, that you're a threat to all bonds, not just the false ones. Lyra's hands clenched into fists. So you want me to lie? I want you to be strategic. There's a difference. Thorn faced her again, his expression softer. I know this is hard. I know you're scared, but you have to trust me. I've been navigating these political waters my whole life. Let me handle the council. You just need to show them you're in control of your power, that you're not a danger to legitimate bonds. Everything he said made sense. Lyra wanted to trust him, wanted to believe he knew what he was doing. But the mark wouldn't stop burning. The council chamber was circular, carved from the same black stone as the rest of the fortress, with a ring of seats rising in tiers around a central floor. Lyra stood in that center with Thorn beside her, facing 12 council members who looked down at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open contempt. Astrid sat in the first tier, her pale eyes fixed on Lyra with predatory focus. We are convened, an elderly male wolf announced, his voice echoing off the stone. Thorn Calith, king of the northern reaches, you have called this emergency session to present your bonded mate and address concerns about her unusual marking. Proceed. Thorn stepped forward, his voice confident and clear. Council members, I present Lyra Voss. 3 nights ago, I witnessed her uncover a conspiracy that spans multiple southern territories. The Greythorn elder, Moravin, has been using ancient magic to engineer false bonds, controlling his pack through artificial connections that mimic true mating marks. Murmurs rippled through the council. Lyra bears a mark that allows her to sense these false bonds and break them. I witnessed her free 6 wolves simultaneously, watched decades of control shatter in moments. This is the proof we've needed that the Southern Council's power is built on lies. Proof, Astrid said, her voice cutting through the whispers. Or a convenient accusation against our rivals, backed by magic we don't understand? I'm telling you what I saw, You're telling us what you want us to believe. Astrid stood, descending to the council floor. But I have questions, my king, starting with, why was this woman unbonded when you found her? Why had her own pack rejected her? Thorn's jaw tightened. That's not relevant. It's entirely relevant. An unbonded wolf bearing a curse mark shows up at the exact moment you need evidence against the Southern Council? That's not coincidence. That's convenience. Commander Astrid, the elderly wolf said warningly, you will address the king with proper respect. I am addressing him with respect. I'm also doing my job, which is protecting this pack from threats. Astrid turned to Lyra. You. Tell us. Why were you rejected? Lyra's throat went dry. Every eye in the chamber fixed on her. I was bonded to Cade Morrow, she said, forcing her voice steady. He rejected me publicly, called me unworthy. 3 months later, at the next bonding ritual, Thorn claimed me. Unworthy, Astrid repeated. Interesting. And this mark appeared when? During the claiming ritual, when Thorn bit me. So the mark appeared because of Thorn's bite, because of something he did. Astrid's smile was sharp. Tell me, has anyone considered that perhaps our king is the one using forbidden magic? The chamber erupted. Thorn moved forward, his voice rising over the chaos. That's absurd. Is it? Astrid's voice cut like a blade. You disappear south for days. You return with a convenient mate bearing a convenient mark that can do convenient things to support your political agenda against the Southern Territories. And now you're asking us to simply trust that this magic isn't a threat to us. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. I am looking at the evidence. And what I see is a king who's been isolated for too long, who rules without a mate, without proper bonds to our pack traditions. What I see is a man who might use any method, even forbidden magic, to maintain his power. Thorn's face went white with fury. You dare accuse me! I dare question you. That's my right as commander. That's my duty. Astrid's eyes swept the council. I propose we test this woman's power. If she can truly break only false bonds, let her demonstrate on one of our own. Let her prove her mark discriminates between real and artificial connections. The elderly wolf frowned. Commander, that's highly irregular. These are irregular times. Astrid looked at Lyra. Unless she's afraid to try. Unless she knows our bonds will shatter just like the Southern ones did. Our bonds won't shatter, Thorn said firmly, because they're real. Lyra, show them. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. The mark was burning so hot it hurt, and the threads she could sense in the chamber were screaming wrongness at her. Thorn, she said quietly, I don't think this is a good idea. Do it! His voice was hard. Prove to them that you're not a threat. Astrid stepped forward, extending her hand. Try me, Southern Wolf. Break my bond if you can. Lyra stared at the commander's hand, at the silver mark visible on her neck, connecting her to someone in the pack. The thread was right there, visible to Lyra's enhanced senses, and it felt wrong. Completely, utterly wrong, just like the bonds at Greythorn. No, Lyra whispered. No, I can't. Because you're afraid of what you'll find, Astrid said softly. You know our bonds are real, and you know breaking them would expose you as the threat you truly are. The mark pulsed, hot and insistent, and Lyra felt the power rising in her without conscious direction. Felt it reaching for Astrid's bond, preparing to snap it like... She saw it then. Saw the whole truth in a flash of horrifying clarity. Astrid's bond wasn't natural. It was engineered, just like the ones at Greythorn. The same magical signature, the same artificial structure, the same control mechanism. But it was old, decades old, which meant... When? Lyra's voice came out ragged. When did the corruption start here? Astrid's expression didn't change. I don't know what you... Your bond. It's false. Just like the ones at Greythorn. Lyra turned to Thorn, saw him staring at her with shock. Thorn, how long has Astrid been bonded? 20 years, he said slowly. Since before I was king, since my father's reign. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Your father, Lyra breathed. Thorn, your father was part of the council's network, The corruption didn't start in the south. It started here. The northern reaches were the testing ground, and once they perfected the magic, they spread it south. That's insane, Thorn said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Lyra's power was still rising, still pulling at the threads around her. Look at your council. Really look. How many of them have bonds that are decades old? How many of them rose to power under your father and stayed in power under you? How many of them are bound to wolves who also happen to be politically convenient? Silence. Thorn's face had gone ashen. His eyes swept the council chamber, and Lyra watched as the doubt took root. You're trying to divide us, Astrid said, but there was an edge to her voice now. To make us question our own bonds. I'm telling you the truth. Lyra's hands were shaking. Your bond is false, Astrid. I can feel it, just like I felt the ones at Greythorn. The same magic, the same control structure. The only difference is yours has been in place longer. Prove it, someone called from the council tiers. Lyra looked at Thorn. He was staring at Astrid with an expression of growing horror. Commander, he said slowly, who are you bonded to? Astrid's jaw clenched. That's private. Who? Thorn's voice cracked like thunder. Counselor Varden. Astrid's voice was tight. We've been bonded for 22 years. Thorn's eyes found an older male in the council seats, a man with gray hair and cold eyes who'd been silent throughout the entire proceeding. Varden, Thorn said, you were my father's chief advisor. You helped arrange bonds throughout the pack. You had access to the old archives, the ancient texts about bond magic. Varden's expression remained calm. As did many of us, my king. That proves nothing. It proves enough to warrant investigation. Thorn's voice was deadly quiet. Lyra, can you break Astrid's bond without harming her? I think so. But Thorn, if I do this, do it. Lyra reached out with her power, felt the thread connecting Astrid to Varden, and pulled. The bond snapped. Astrid gasped, stumbling backward, her hand flying to her neck where the silver mark was fading to gray. Her face went through a series of expressions, shock, confusion, then dawning horror. 22 years, she whispered. 22 years, and I didn't. Her eyes found Varden in the council seats, and they filled with a rage so pure it was terrifying. What did you do to me? Varden stood calmly. I gave you purpose, direction. I made you the finest commander this pack has ever. You made me your puppet. Astrid's voice was raw. Everything I thought I felt, everything I believed, it was all a lie. It was necessary, Varden said, and his voice carried no remorse. The pack needed strong leadership. Your natural instincts were too chaotic, too wild. The bond gave you focus. The bond stole my life. Chaos erupted in the council chamber. Wolves were shouting, some demanding answers, others defending the old ways. Lyra felt other bonds in the room, dozens of them, all carrying that same false signature. How deep did this go? How many generations? She looked at Thorn and saw him staring at Varden with an expression of absolute betrayal. My father, Thorn said. Did my father know? Varden's smile was small and sad. Your father built this system, my king. He understood that true freedom leads to chaos, that wolves need guidance, structure, bonds that ensure loyalty and stability. He created the network, perfected the magic, and spread it south to bring order to the chaos of the territories. He enslaved his own pack. He saved them from themselves. Varden's voice was firm. And you've benefited from that stability your entire reign. Every loyal soldier, every devoted advisor, every bond that's kept this pack unified, you've relied on our system without even knowing it. Thorn's hands were shaking. How many? How many bonds are false? Most of them, Varden said simply. We've been refining the process for 3 generations. By now, the majority of bonds formed in the northern reaches are guided, controlled, optimized for pack stability. You're telling me my entire pack is built on lies. I'm telling you your pack is built on order, on carefully cultivated loyalty that's kept us strong while the southern territories tear themselves apart with petty disputes and mating drama. Varden's eyes were cold. Your father understood this. He built something beautiful and functional, and then you had to bring home a weapon designed to destroy it. All eyes turned to Lyra, and She stood in the center of the chamber, the mark on her neck burning like a brand, and felt the weight of their collective fear and fury. "She's the threat," Varden continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Not the bonds, not the system. That woman standing there with the Unmaker's curse. She'll destroy every bond in the reaches if she's allowed to live. She'll tear apart families, shatter loyalties, reduce us to chaos and violence." "Or she'll set you free," Lyra said quietly. "Free to do what? Kill each other? Abandon our mates and children? Descend into the same chaos that plagued us before the bonds?" Varden shook his head. "No. The system exists for a reason. It keeps us civilized, stable, strong." "It keeps you in control," Astrid snarled. She was still staring at Varden with murderous intent. "You and your council, deciding who bonds with who rises to power, who gets to live free, and who gets chained. Someone has to make those decisions. Left to your own devices, wolves choose poorly. They bond with incompatible mates, create unstable family lines, fracture pack unity. We prevent that." Thorn moved then, crossing the chamber floor to stand between Lyra and the council. "Get out," he said, his voice soft and deadly. Varden frowned. "My king, get out. All of you. The session is over. You can't simply dismiss—" "I'm the king. I can do whatever the fuck I want." Thorn's eyes were blazing. "You have 1 hour to gather your supporters and leave my territory. After that, I hunt you down myself." Varden's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. The bonds are the only thing holding this pack together. Without them, we'll find out who we really are. Now get out before I forget you were my father's friend and kill you where you stand." For a long moment, Varden held Thorn's gaze. Then he bowed, the gesture mocking, and turned to leave. Half the council left with him. The remaining wolves sat in stunned silence, hands rising to touch their own bond marks, doubt and horror warring on their faces. Thorn turned to Astrid. "Commander, I need you to—" "Don't!" Astrid's voice was raw. "Don't ask me for anything right now. I can't. I don't—" She pressed her hands to her temples. 22 years. I have children with him. Children I thought I wanted because the bond made me want them. How do I even begin to process that? "I don't know," Thorn said quietly, "but we'll figure it out together." Astrid laughed, and it sounded broken. "Together, right, because that worked out so well the first time." She left, moving like someone in shock. One by one, the remaining council members filed out, until only Thorn and Lyra remained in the vast chamber. Thorn stood with his back to her, his shoulders rigid, his breathing harsh. "Say it," he said finally. "Say what?" "That you were right. That I was a fool for bringing you here. That I should have listened when you warned me." Lyra moved closer, her hand reaching for his shoulder. "Thorn—" He spun, catching her wrist. His eyes were wild, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "My entire life is a lie," he said, his voice shaking. "Every bond I witnessed, every piece of advice I took from that council, every decision I made based on the stability of this pack, all of it built on false foundations. My father enslaved our people and I just continued his work without even knowing it." "You didn't know." "I should have known." His grip on her wrist tightened. "I'm the king. It's my job to know what's happening in my own territory, but I was too focused on the South, too convinced our bonds were pure while theirs were corrupt. And all along we were worse than them. We were the source." Lyra saw the devastation in his eyes, the complete collapse of everything he'd believed about himself and his pack. "What do we do now?" she whispered. Thorn released her wrist and turned away. "I don't know. Half my council just walked out. The wolves who remain will be questioning their own bonds, wondering if their entire lives are lies. Varden will gather support, probably try to stage a coup. And you—" He laughed bitterly. "You're standing there with the power to destroy every false bond in my territory. And I have no idea if that would save us or finish what my father started and reduce us to chaos." The mark on Lyra's neck pulsed, and she felt it clearly. Hundreds of false bonds throughout the fortress. Thousands more spreading across the territory. All of them waiting to be severed. All of them representing lives built on lies. If she broke them all at once, what would happen? Would the wolves thank her for their freedom, Or would they tear each other apart in the aftermath? I can't do this alone, Thorn said quietly. I can't fix what my father broke. I can't even begin to know where to start. Lyra opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, the doors to the council chamber slammed open. Kael burst in, his face white with panic. My king, we have a problem. A big one. What now? Thorn's voice was weary. Varden didn't leave the territory. He went to the barracks. He's been talking to the soldiers, showing them documents, old texts. Kael's eyes found Lyra. He's convinced them that she's the corruption, that the only way to save the pack is to... An explosion rocked the fortress. Lyra stumbled, catching herself on one of the council seats. Thorn was already moving, running toward the doors, with Lyra close behind. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the main courtyard and froze. At least 200 soldiers stood assembled below, all armed, all bearing the silver marks of false bonds. And at their head stood Varden, holding a torch that burned with strange blue flame. Thorn Calith, Varden's voice boomed across the courtyard. You harbor a creature that threatens the very foundation of our society. Surrender the Unmaker to us, or we will take her by force. Thorn's hand found Lyra's, his fingers lacing through hers tight enough to hurt. You touch her, and I'll burn this entire fortress to the ground, he called back. Then you'll die with her. Varden's smile was serene. Because these soldiers won't let you pass. They're bonded to this pack, loyal to our way of life. They'll die to protect it. They're bonded to you, Lyra shouted. You control them just like Morven controlled his wolves. They're not choosing this. They're choosing order over chaos, stability over freedom. Varden raised the torch higher. And if you won't come willingly, we'll come to you. The soldiers began to advance. Thorn pulled Lyra back from the balcony, his mind clearly racing. The escape tunnel, he said. In my quarters. It leads outside the fortress walls. You'd run? Lyra stared at him. Abandon your pack? I'd save your life. His voice was raw. Because you're the only one who can fix this. If they kill you, the false bonds stay in place forever. Varden wins. My father's system continues. And if I run, those soldiers kill you for protecting me. Then that's how I die. Lyra's heart twisted. She looked down at the advancing soldiers, felt their false bonds pulsing in her awareness, and knew what she had to do. What she'd always had to do. I can break them, she said quietly. All of them. Every false bond in this fortress, maybe farther. I can feel how to do it now. One massive push, and they'd all be free. It would probably kill you. Thorn's voice was flat. That much power, all at once. You're not trained for it. It would burn you out from the inside. Probably. Lyra met his eyes. But it's the only way to stop this without slaughtering 200 wolves who are just following orders they can't resist. No. Thorn's grip on her hand tightened. Absolutely not. We find another way. There is no other way. Lyra pulled free from his grasp. This is what I was made for, Thorn. The Unmaker. I break the bonds, set these wolves free, and destroy the system your father built. That's my purpose. Your purpose is to survive. He grabbed her shoulders, his face inches from hers. Your purpose is to live long enough to tear down the entire corrupt network across all the territories. Not just here, everywhere. But you can't do that if you're dead. Below, the soldiers were climbing the stairs. They had maybe a minute before. The mark on Lyra's neck flared white hot, and power exploded from her body like a supernova. She didn't consciously direct it. The mark did it for her, reaching out to every false bond within range and yanking. Threads snapped by the hundreds. Lyra felt each one break, felt the shock and confusion and sudden, terrible freedom of every wolf whose bond shattered, felt Varden's control network collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane, felt her own body begin to tear apart under the strain. Pain beyond anything she'd experienced lanced through her. She was dimly aware of screaming, of Thorn catching her as her legs gave out, of blood pouring from her nose and ears. The mark was burning, consuming her from within, and she knew with absolute clarity that it was going to kill her. She'd saved them, and it was going to cost her. Lyra's body was on fire from the inside out. She could feel herself dying cell by cell as the mark consumed her like fuel for the massive wave of power she'd unleashed. Blood ran from her nose, her ears, the corners of her eyes. Her vision blurred, the world reducing to shapes and colors that didn't make sense. Thorn was shouting something, his hands on her face, but she couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears. Couldn't focus on anything except the sensation of hundreds of bonds snapping simultaneously, the shock waves of freed consciousness rippling out from her like stones thrown in still water. She felt Varden's bond to Astrid break, felt the bonds of every soldier in the courtyard shatter, felt the network her father-in-law had built across 3 generations collapse in the span of seconds, and it was killing her. "Lyra!" Thorn's voice finally penetrated the chaos. "Lyra, stop! You have to stop!" "Can't!" The word came out garbled, thick with blood. "Can't control it." The mark had taken over completely, burning through her reserves, reaching farther and farther out across the territory. She could feel it touching bonds miles away, in the outer settlements, the hunting camps, the border posts. Could feel each one snap like a thread pulled too tight, freedom spreading like wildfire, death spreading through her veins like ice. Thorn scooped her up, cradling her against his chest as he ran. Lyra's head lolled against his shoulder, her body limp and unresponsive. She tried to speak, to tell him it was too late, but her tongue wouldn't cooperate. "Kael!" Thorn's bellow echoed off stone walls. "Get a healer! Now!" "The healers are all—" Kael's voice was panicked. "Their bonds just broke, my lord. They're in shock. Everyone's in shock." Thorn cursed viciously. He kicked open a door, his quarters, Lyra recognized dimly, and laid her on the massive bed. His hands moved over her body, checking for wounds, trying to understand what was happening. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "What the fuck did you do?" Lyra's lips moved. "Saved them." "You're dying!" "I know." It was getting harder to breathe. The mark on her neck was so hot she could smell her own flesh burning. "Thorn, no. Don't you dare say goodbye." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You don't get to save everyone else and leave me here. You don't get to do that. Not a choice." Each word cost her. The mark, it wanted this, needed this. One massive break to shatter the whole system at once. Fuck the system. Fuck the mark. Thorn's voice was raw with desperation. "I need you alive. Do you understand? I need you." Lyra tried to smile, failed. "You'll be fine. You're the king. You'll rebuild." "I don't want to rebuild without you." He was shaking her now, gentle but insistent. "Lyra, listen to me. You have to fight this. You have to—" The door slammed open. Astrid stood there, her face pale, her eyes wild. The spot on her neck where Varden's mark had been was raw and red, like a brand that had been torn away. What did she do? Astrid's voice was hollow. Every bond in the fortress just broke. Hundreds of them, all at once. She's dying. Thorn didn't look away from Lyra. The power is burning her out. Astrid moved closer, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Lyra thought she might attack, might finish what the mark had started. But instead, the commander knelt beside the bed, her eyes scanning Lyra's ravaged body with professional assessment. "The mark is feeding on her life force," Astrid said quietly, "using her as a conduit for power that's too massive for one wolf to channel. It's why the Unmaker always dies. The mark doesn't care about the host's survival." "Then how do we stop it?" Thorn demanded. "We don't. It's already in motion." Astrid's hand hovered over the black designs spreading across Lyra's skin. They'd grown, covering her throat, her collarbone, creeping down her chest like living vines. The only way to stop it would be to cut off the power source, but that would leave all those broken bonds in limbo. The wolves would be worse off than before, freed but not truly free, still connected to phantom bonds that would drive them mad. There has to be another way. There isn't. Astrid's voice was flat. "I've seen the old texts. The ones Varden showed me, the ones he used to justify the system. They talk about the Unmaker, about how she appears, breaks the false bonds, and burns herself to ash in the process. It's a cycle, a sacrifice that resets the corruption." Lyra's vision was fading, the room going dark at the edges. She could still feel the mark working, still sense bonds breaking farther and farther out, but the sensation was distant now, like it was happening to someone else. "Lyra," Thorn's voice was a lifeline. "Stay with me, please. Just stay with me. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But the darkness was so inviting, so much easier than the agony consuming her body. Then she felt something else. A new presence, pressing against her fading consciousness. The broken bonds she'd severed weren't just disappearing, they were reforming. Not as false constructs, but as raw potential, like roots reaching for new soil, seeking genuine connections instead of engineered ones. And they were all connected to her, to the mark, to the power burning through her veins. Wait. Lyra forced her eyes open, forced words past her bloody lips. They're not gone. The bonds. They're changing. Thorn leaned closer. What? The wolves I freed. They're not losing their connections. They're finding real ones. The mark is showing them who they're actually meant to be with, who they actually love instead of who they were told to love. Astrid's breath caught. That's impossible. It's happening. Lyra could feel it clearly now, despite the pain. Hundreds of threads reforming, weaving new patterns based on genuine attraction, real compatibility, actual choice. The mark doesn't just destroy, it rebuilds. It shows the truth. Then it's not killing you to break the bonds, Thorn said slowly. It's killing you to forge new ones, real ones. Yes? How many? Astrid demanded. How many bonds are reforming? Lyra tried to count, tried to track the threads spreading across the territory, and felt her mind fracture under the enormity of it. Too many, she whispered. Can't hold them all. Her body arched off the bed, seized by convulsions as the power surged again. Blood poured from her mouth, her nose, soaking into the furs beneath her. Thorn held her down, his face a mask of helpless fury. There has to be a way to share the burden, to distribute the power instead of forcing her to channel it all alone. The old texts don't mention anything like that, Astrid said. Fuck the old texts. Thorn's eyes were wild. They were written by people who wanted the Unmaker dead, who saw her as a threat to be eliminated, not a solution to be preserved. Of course, they wouldn't include a way to save her. A thought crystallized in Lyra's fragmenting mind. Thorn, she gasped, your bite, when you claimed me. That's what triggered the mark. So? So you're connected to it, to me, to this power. She grabbed his hand, pressed it against the burning mark on her neck. Share it. Take some of the burden. I don't know how yet. Bite me again. Complete the bond. A real one this time. Thorn stared at her, understanding and horror warring in his expression. That could kill us both. We're both dead anyway if we don't try. Lyra's grip on his hand tightened. Please, trust me. For one endless moment, Thorn hesitated. Then he bent his head to her throat, his canines lengthening and bit down hard on the mark. Pain exploded through Lyra's body, but this time it was different. Instead of consuming her, the power split, flowing from her into Thorn like water finding a new channel. She felt his shock, his agony as the mark's full force hit him, felt him stagger under the weight of hundreds of reforming bonds, the sheer psychic pressure of so many wolves all crying out for genuine connection. But he didn't break. He held. Fuck! Thorn gasped against her throat, his blood mixing with hers. Fuck! That's too much. Hold on. Lyra's hand came up to cradle the back of his head. Just hold on. We can do this together. The mark pulsed between them, and Lyra felt something shift. The power that had been killing her was now distributed across two bodies, two minds, two souls linked by a bond that was finally, genuinely real. She could feel Thorn in a way she'd never felt anyone, could sense his thoughts, his fears, his absolute determination not to lose her, could feel the love he'd been too proud or too scared to voice. And she could feel him feeling her strength, her fury, her refusal to surrender even when death was breathing down her neck. Together, they held the power. Together, they guided it, shaping the reforming bonds across the territory into something beautiful and true instead of twisted and false. It took hours. By the time the last bond settled into place, Lyra's body was shaking with exhaustion, and Thorn looked like he'd aged a decade. But they were both alive. The mark on Lyra's neck had changed. Instead of the chaotic black vines, it now showed a clear pattern. Two wolves intertwined, their forms merged into something unified and whole. And on Thorn's neck, a matching mark had appeared, silver white against his skin. A real bond, chosen freely, born from shared trauma and absolute trust. Astrid was staring at them both like they'd grown second heads. "That shouldn't have worked," she said quietly. "But it did." Thorn slowly released Lyra, sitting back on the bed. His hands were shaking. "It worked because the mark isn't just destruction, it's transformation. And transformation requires sacrifice from both sides." "How poetic." The new voice came from the doorway. Varden stood there, flanked by a dozen soldiers whose necks were bare of any bond mark. Their faces were twisted with rage and confusion, and they gripped their weapons like drowning men clutching debris. "You destroyed everything," Varden said, his voice eerily calm. 3 generations of careful work, gone in minutes." Thorn rose to his feet, placing himself between Varden and Lyra. "You enslaved our people. We set them free. You set them loose." Varden's eyes were cold. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Those soldiers behind me, they had families, children, bonds they believed in. Now they're discovering their entire lives were manufactured. Their mates were assigned. Their children are products of political calculation. How do you think they're handling that truth?" "Better than living a lie," Lyra said, forcing herself to sit up despite the weakness in her limbs. Varden's laugh was bitter. "Are they? Because from what I'm hearing, the fortress is in chaos. Wolves are abandoning mates they never truly loved. Children are learning their parents were forced together. Families are fracturing. And you call that freedom?" "I call it truth." Lyra met his eyes. "And truth is messy. It hurts. But it's real, which is more than can be said for your system. My system kept them safe, fed, housed, loyal." Varden's mask of calm cracked. "My system prevented the violence and chaos that plagued our ancestors. Prevented wolves from killing each other over mating disputes. Prevented the strong from dominating the weak through brute force." "You prevented choice," Thorn said quietly. "You prevented growth, change, genuine connection. You fossilized us in a system that benefited you and your council while robbing everyone else of their autonomy. And now what?" Varden gestured at the soldiers behind him. "Now you have hundreds of confused, angry wolves who don't know who they are anymore. Now you have children questioning if their parents love them. Now you have bonds reforming based on, what? Lust? Convenience? Whatever fleeting emotion happens to be strongest in the moment? Based on truth," Lyra said. "Real attraction, real compatibility, real choice, real chaos." Varden's hand went to his belt, and Lyra saw the knife there. "I can't let that stand. I won't. This pack was built on order, and I'll restore that order even if I have to kill you both to do it." The soldiers behind him shifted, raising their weapons. Thorn's body tensed, ready for violence. But before he could move, the door burst open again and more wolves poured in, at least 20 of them, led by Astrid. The commander's face was hard as stone, and in her hand she carried a sword that looked like it had seen a lot of use. "Stand down, Varden," she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. Varden's eyes narrowed. "You would side with them? After what they did to you? After they destroyed your bond? They freed me from a prison I didn't know I was in." Astrid's knuckles were white on her sword hilt. 22 years, Varden. 22 years I believed I loved you, that I chose you, that our children were wanted. They were wanted. What? By you. Because it was politically convenient. Because bonding the commander to the chief advisor created a power structure that served the council. Astrid's voice shook with fury. "I remember now, little flashes, moments before the bond took hold when I looked at you and felt nothing. When I tried to walk away and you brought me to the ritual chambers. When I woke up, marked and told myself it was meant to be because the alternative was too horrifying. I gave you a good life. You stole my life." Astrid moved forward, her sword point leveled at Varden's throat. "And I would kill you right now if I didn't think you were too pathetic to waste the effort." Varden's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful—" He lunged. Everything happened at once. Varden's knife flashed toward Astrid. She sidestepped, her sword coming up to block. The soldiers behind Varden charged forward. The wolves behind Astrid met them with a roar of fury. Thorn grabbed Lyra and pulled her off the bed, away from the sudden explosion of violence that turned his quarters into a battlefield. Lyra watched in horror as wolf fought wolf, all of them former packmates, all of them confused and angry and desperate. Blood sprayed across the furs, someone screamed. Steel met steel with sounds that made her teeth ache. "We have to stop this," she said. "We can't." Thorn's voice was grim. "This has been building for decades. They need to fight it out." "They'll kill each other." "Some of them, yes." He pulled her toward the balcony, away from the worst of the fighting. "But the alternative is letting Varden rally support and start a civil war that would kill thousands. Better to end it here, now, with the wolves who are truly loyal to his vision of order." Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to stop the violence, but deep down she knew Thorn was right. This wasn't her fight. This was the pack working through generations of repressed rage and confusion, and they had to do it themselves. Astrid was magnificent in combat, her sword a blur of silver as she drove Varden back step by step. The older man was skilled, but he was slower, weaker, and fighting against someone who had 22 years of fury powering every strike. "You made me believe I was weak," Astrid snarled as her blade opened a cut across Varden's shoulder. "That I needed guidance, that my instincts were wrong. They were wrong," Varden blocked desperately. "You would have bonded with some brute warrior and wasted your tactical genius on choosing my own fucking life." Astrid's next strike knocked the knife from his hand. "On making my own mistakes. On being human instead of your perfect, obedient tool." She kicked him hard in the chest, sending him sprawling backward onto the blood-slicked floor. Around them, the fighting was winding down. Most of Varden's soldiers were down, either dead or surrendering. The wolves, loyal to Astrid, stood victorious, breathing hard, covered in wounds but alive. Astrid stood over Varden, her sword at his throat. "Give me one reason not to kill you," she said. Varden smiled up at her, and there was blood on his teeth. "Because deep down, you know I'm right. You know the system worked. And when this new chaos tears the pack apart, when wolves start killing each other over real mating disputes instead of manufactured ones, you'll remember that I tried to stop it." Astrid's sword didn't waver. "Maybe. Or maybe we'll build something better. Something based on truth instead of lies. Something where wolves are free to choose and free to fail and free to be actually fucking human." "That's not how wolves work. Then maybe it's time we evolved." Astrid drove her sword down. Varden's eyes went wide with shock, then empty. His blood pooled on the floor, mixing with the blood of the soldiers who died defending his vision of order. The room fell silent. Astrid stood there, sword dripping, her chest heaving with exertion and emotion. Then she turned to face Thorn. "My king," she said, her voice formal despite the carnage around them. "I have killed a member of your council. I submit myself for judgment." Thorn studied her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "You killed a traitor who enslaved his own pack and tried to murder his king's mate. There's nothing to judge." He moved forward, stepping over bodies, until he stood before her. "You're free, Astrid. For the first time in 22 years, you're free. What will you do with it?" Astrid's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the blood spatter on her face. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know who I am without the bond, without the certainty it gave me. I don't know how to be free." "None of us do," Lyra said quietly, moving to stand beside Thorn. "We're all going to have to learn together." Astrid's eyes found hers, and something shifted in that gaze. Not friendship, not yet, but a tentative respect. "You nearly died saving us," Astrid said. "Why?" "Because no one should have to live a lie." Lyra's hand found Thorn's, their fingers lacing together. "Because you deserved the chance to choose, all of you. And now we have it." Astrid looked around at the surviving wolves, at the dead on the floor, at the blood painting everything red. "Now we have freedom and chaos, and absolutely no idea what comes next. We rebuild," Thorn said firmly. "We take the time we need to mourn, to process, to figure out who we are when we're not being controlled. Then we rebuild the pack on real foundations, real bonds, real loyalty earned instead of manufactured. And if it fails, if we descend into the violence Varden predicted, then we deal with that when it happens." Thorn's voice was steady. "But I'd rather face real problems born from freedom than false peace built on slavery." Astrid nodded slowly. Then she turned to address the surviving wolves. "Varden is dead. His vision of order dies with him. Her voice carried through the room, commanding attention. What comes next is up to all of us. Some of you are discovering your bonds were false. Some of you are finding real connections forming. Some of you are realizing you've been living with strangers. That's going to hurt. It's going to be messy, but it's real. And real is what we fight for now. The wolves stirred, muttering among themselves. Lyra could feel the new bonds forming, the threads of genuine attraction and compatibility weaving through the pack. Not everyone would find a true bond immediately. Some might never find one, but they'd have the choice. That was what mattered. A younger wolf stepped forward, his face pale. "Commander, what about the children? The ones born to false bonds? What do we tell them?" Astrid's expression softened. "We tell them the truth, that they were born into a system none of us understood, that their parents are figuring out what they really feel, that love takes many forms, and just because a romantic bond was manufactured doesn't mean the love for a child can't be real." "But what if," the young wolf's voice cracked, "what if my parents split up? What if they discover they hate each other?" "Then they split up," Astrid said gently. "And you'll have two parents in separate homes instead of two parents forcing themselves to coexist. Is that ideal?" "No. But it's honest. And honest is better than the alternative." The young wolf looked like he might cry, but he nodded. More questions came, rapid fire, desperate. How do we know if what we feel is real? How do we trust ourselves when we've been manipulated for so long? What happens to wolves who can't form new bonds? What if we make mistakes? Thorn and Astrid fielded them as best they could, but Lyra could see the exhaustion setting in. They were all running on empty, trauma and adrenaline the only things keeping them upright. Finally, Thorn raised his hand for silence. "Enough for tonight. We've all been through hell. We need rest, healing, time to process." His eyes swept the room. "Take the night. Mourn your losses, tend your wounds, sit with your confusion. Tomorrow we start the real work of rebuilding. But tonight, we survive. That's enough." The wolves dispersed slowly, helping the wounded, removing the dead. Within minutes, only Thorn, Lyra, and Astrid remained in the blood-soaked quarters. Astrid looked at the mess, her expression weary. "You'll need new rooms. These are ruined. I'll have them cleaned." Thorn's arm tightened around Lyra's waist. "Right now, I need to know my mate is actually going to survive the night." "I'll survive," Lyra said, though in truth she felt like she might collapse at any moment. The mark on her neck had settled into a dull ache, and every muscle in her body screamed with exhaustion. "You nearly didn't." Thorn's voice was rough. "When I felt you dying, when I thought I was going to lose you." He didn't finish, didn't need to. Lyra leaned into him, letting his strength support her. "We made it, both of us. This time." Astrid's voice was sharp. "But Varden was right about one thing. Word of what happened here will spread. Every corrupted elder in every territory will hear about the Unmaker who destroyed the Northern Reach's bond system. They'll come for you, Lyra. All of them." "Let them come." Lyra's voice was stronger than she felt. "I broke hundreds of bonds tonight. I can break thousands more if I have to." "It will kill you eventually," Astrid said bluntly. "Even with Thorn sharing the burden, the power is too vast and you're only human." "Then I'll die freeing wolves from slavery." Lyra met the commander's eyes. "That's better than dying alone and rejected in Greythorn." Astrid studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded, something like approval in her expression. "You're tougher than you look, Southern Wolf." "I'm learning." A commotion outside drew their attention. Kale appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "My king, we have a situation. Riders from Greythorn just arrived at the gates. They're requesting asylum." Thorn's eyebrows rose. "How many?" 43. Men, women, children. They say Moravin's dead, killed by his own wolves after Lyra broke their bonds. The pack is tearing itself apart. They want sanctuary here." Lyra's breath caught. "Moravin's dead?" Apparently his wolves didn't take kindly to learning they'd been enslaved for generations. Kale's voice was dry. "Who knew?" "We take them in," Thorn said immediately. "Set up housing in the East Wing. Make sure they're fed, clothed, given whatever they need." "My lord, we barely have resources to care for our own—" "We take them in," Thorn repeated, his voice firm. "They're refugees from the same system we just destroyed. They deserve sanctuary." Kael bowed and left. Astrid shook her head. You're going to end up ruling half the territories at this rate. Every pack that falls apart is going to send their refugees here. Then we'll expand. Thorn's jaw set stubbornly. We'll build something new. A coalition of free packs bonded by choice instead of coercion. That's dangerously idealistic. It's necessary. Thorn looked at Lyra. The old system is dying. We can either try to preserve it or build something better from the ashes. I choose better. Lyra felt something warm bloom in her chest. This man, this fierce, stubborn, complicated man, was choosing her vision of freedom over generations of tradition, was risking his entire kingdom on the belief that wolves could choose their own paths. Thank you, she said quietly. Thorn's hand cupped her cheek. Don't thank me. You're the one who started this revolution. I'm just trying to keep up. A new voice interrupted them, sharp and urgent. My king, commander, we have a bigger problem. Another messenger burst into the room, this one a woman with wild eyes and blood on her clothes. What now? Astrid demanded. The Southern Territories. Multiple packs reporting mass bond failures. Wolves are rising up against their elders demanding answers. There's fighting in Silverstream, Ironwood, Crestfall. The woman's voice shook. It's spreading. Whatever Lyra did here, it's triggering a chain reaction across the territories. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. I only broke the bonds here. You showed them it was possible, the messenger said. Word traveled fast. Greythorn refugees spread the story. Now wolves everywhere are questioning their bonds, testing them, and when they find them false, they're breaking free, Thorn finished, his expression grim, and killing the elders who enslaved them, the messenger added. There are reports of executions, uprisings, entire council chambers burned to the ground with the elders inside. Silence fell like a hammer. Lyra's legs gave out. Thorn caught her, lowering her gently to sit on the edge of the bed. I didn't mean, she started. You started something that can't be stopped, Astrid said, and there was no accusation in her voice, just statement of fact. The territories are in full revolt. Within days, maybe hours, every false bond will either break or be tested to destruction. The old order is collapsing. What do we do? Lyra whispered. Thorn's hand found hers, gripping tight. We do what we planned. We build something better. We offer sanctuary to wolves fleeing the chaos. We create a model of what free packs can look like. And we prepare... Prepare for what? Lyra asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Thorn's eyes were hard as flint. For the elders who survive. For the councils that won't go quietly. For the wolves who benefited from the old system and want it back. He looked at the messenger. How many territories are currently in revolt? At least 12 that we know of, probably more by now. And how many are still under elder control? Unknown, but the major strongholds, Shadowfen, Bloodmoor, Iron Peak, they're all still quiet. Either their bonds haven't been tested yet, or their elders are keeping control through force. They'll come for us, Astrid said quietly. Once they realize what's happening, they'll unite against the common threat. Against Lyra. Let them. Lyra's voice was stronger now, fueled by determination instead of fear. I'm done hiding, done running. If they want to preserve their slave system, they'll have to go through me first. Through us, Thorn corrected. His hand tightened on hers. You're not facing this alone. The messenger cleared her throat. My king, there's one more thing. A message arrived by Raven just before the Greythorn refugees, from someone calling herself Mirelle. Lyra's blood ran cold. Mirelle? You know her? Thorn asked sharply. No, but I've heard the name. In the visions the mark gives me. Lyra's hand went to her neck, where the mark pulsed warm. She's one of the experiments. From before the bond system was perfected. They tried the magic on her and it went wrong, twisted her into something. Into what? Astrid demanded. Into a weapon. Lyra's voice was hollow. A wolf, who can steal bonds instead of just breaking them. Who can drain the power from connected mates and use it for herself. The messenger held out a piece of parchment. She says she's coming for you, Lyra. Says you have something she needs. Says she'll burn every pack in the territories to ash if you don't surrender yourself. Thorn took the message, read it, and his face went white. What does it say? Lyra asked. She knows about the mark. about what you can do. And she wants it. Thorn's voice was tight. She's going to try to take your power for herself, to become the Unmaker instead of you. Can she do that? Astrid asked. I don't know. Lyra felt sick. But if she can, if she gets this power and she's already twisted, then she could destroy every bond in existence, Thorn finished, real and false. Leave the territories completely fractured, wolves unable to form any connections at all. When? Lyra forced the word out. When is she coming? The messenger's face was grave. She's already here. Her forces hit the outer settlements an hour ago. They're moving fast, killing anyone who gets in their way. She'll reach the fortress by dawn. Dawn. They had maybe 6 hours. Thorn stood, his expression shifting into something cold and calculated. Astrid, mobilize every wolf who can fight. I want the walls fortified, archers on the ramparts, traps set on the approach roads. Kael, get the refugees into the deep shelters and post guards. No one gets to them. Orders flew fast, wolves scattering to obey. Within minutes, the fortress was transforming into a war machine, every able-bodied wolf preparing for the battle to come. Lyra sat on the blood-stained bed, her hands shaking, and tried to process what was happening. She'd broken the bonds to set wolves free, but in doing so, she'd painted a target on her back that every twisted experiment, every desperate elder, every power-hungry wolf would aim for. And now one of them was coming. A woman who'd been broken by the same system Lyra was trying to destroy, who'd been twisted into something monstrous, who wanted to steal the power that was barely keeping Lyra alive. Thorn returned, his face set in grim lines. We'll hold her off, he said, whatever it takes. She's like me, Lyra said quietly. Another victim of the system, another wolf they experimented on and destroyed. She's coming to kill you and steal your power. Doesn't matter what made her that way. It matters to me. Lyra met his eyes. Because I could have been her. If you hadn't found me, if I'd been alone when the mark awakened, if the pain and the power had twisted me instead of freeing me, I could have become exactly what she is. Thorn's expression softened. He knelt in front of her, taking both her hands in his. But you didn't. You chose to save wolves instead of enslaving them. You chose freedom over control. That's the difference between you and her. Is it? Or am I just lucky that I had you to share the burden? Maybe luck plays a part, but I've seen your heart, Lyra. Seen what you're willing to sacrifice for strangers. Morel might have been a victim once, but now she's a threat. And we stop threats. Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to save Morel, like she'd saved the bonded wolves. But deep down, she knew Thorn was right. Some wolves were too broken to be saved. Some monsters had to be stopped. What's the plan? She asked. You stay in the fortress, protected, hidden. Let her come looking while we thin our forces. Absolutely not. Thorn's jaw clenched. Lyra, I'm not hiding while other wolves die protecting me. Her voice was firm. This is my fight, my responsibility. If Morel wants the mark, she'll have to take it from me directly. That's exactly what she'll try to do. I know. Lyra stood, forcing strength into her shaking legs. But if she gets past your defenses, if she breaks through and comes for me anyway, wouldn't you rather I was prepared to fight instead of cowering in some shelter? Thorn's hands clenched into fists. I can't watch you die again. I barely survived it the first time. Then don't watch. Fight beside me. Lyra stepped closer, her hand cupping his face. We do this together, remember? You and me. That's how we survived the bond breaking. That's how we'll survive this. For a long moment, Thorn just looked at her. Then he pulled her close, his arms banding around her like he could shield her from the world through sheer force of will. If she touches you, he said against her hair, if she hurts you, I'll rip her apart with my bare hands. I know. I'm not losing you, Lyra. Not to Morel, not to the mark, not to anything. You won't. She hoped it was true. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the fortress prepared for war around them. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was coming, and with it, the battle that would determine whether Lyra's revolution survived its first real test. Astrid appeared in the doorway, her armor on, her sword strapped to her back. They're here, she said quietly. At the outer walls. At least 200 wolves, all bearing twisted bond marks. And at their head, She paused. You need to see this. They followed her to the ramparts, where guards were gathered, staring out at the approaching force. Lyra looked down and felt her blood freeze. Morel stood at the front of her army, and she was beautiful in a terrible wrong way. Her hair was white as bone, her eyes black from edge to edge, and her skin was covered in marks. Not the elegant patterns of Lyra's Unmaker brand, but chaotic, writhing designs that looked like they were moving, consuming her from the outside in. She was smiling, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the distance like she was standing right beside them. "Hello, sister," Morel called. "I've waited so long to meet you, the one who can do what I failed to do, the one who broke the bonds instead of just stealing them." Her smile widened. "Give me your mark, and I'll make your death quick. Refuse, and I'll kill everyone in that fortress while you watch. Your choice." Lyra felt Thorn tense beside her, felt Astrid's hand go to her sword. The mark on her neck pulsed, and for the first time she felt fear ripple through it. Not her fear, the mark's fear. It recognized Morel as a threat, as something that could actually destroy it. Lyra looked at the twisted woman below, at the army of corrupted wolves behind her, at the fortress full of refugees and freed wolves who'd come here seeking sanctuary. She thought about running, about surrendering, about any option that didn't involve this confrontation. Then she thought about everything she'd fought for, every bond she'd broken, every wolf she'd set free. She thought about Thorn beside her, his hand finding hers, his presence solid and unwavering, and she made her choice. "No," Lyra called down, her voice steady and clear. "You want my mark? You want my power? Come take it, if you can." Morel's smile faded, her black eyes fixed on Lyra with absolute focus. "So be it," she said. Then she raised her hand and her army charged. The siege had. The first wave hit the walls like a tsunami of claws and fury. Morel's corrupted wolves slammed into the fortress defenses with inhuman strength, their twisted bond marks glowing sickly green in the pre-dawn light. They didn't fight like normal wolves. They fought like berserkers, throwing themselves at the walls without regard for their own lives, climbing over the bodies of their fallen to reach the ramparts. Thorn's archers fired volley after volley, arrows finding their marks. But for every corrupted wolf that fell, 2 more took its place. The air filled with screams, the clash of steel, the wet sounds of bodies hitting stone. Lyra stood on the ramparts beside Thorn, watching the carnage unfold, and felt the mark on her neck burning with terrible awareness. She could sense every corrupted bond down there, could feel how Morel had twisted the natural connection between souls into chains of absolute control. These wolves weren't choosing to fight. They were compelled, driven by magic that had hollowed them out and filled the space with Morel's will. "They're not going to stop," Astrid shouted over the noise. Blood sprayed across her face as she drove her sword through a corrupted wolf who'd made it over the wall. "She's pushing them to suicide charges." "She doesn't care if they die," Lyra said, her voice hollow. "They're just tools to her. Weapons to throw at us until we break." Thorn's hand found hers, gripping tight. "Then we don't break." But even as he said it, Lyra saw the doubt in his eyes. They were outnumbered 3-1, and more corrupted wolves were pouring from the forest every minute. Morel stood back from the fighting, untouched, watching with those terrible black eyes as her army ground itself against the fortress defenses. She was waiting for the walls to fall, for exhaustion to set in, for the moment when Lyra would be vulnerable. "We need to end this fast," Lyra said, "before she wears us down." "How?" Thorn blocked a clawed strike, his blade opening the attacker's throat. "She's staying back, out of range. We can't get to her without fighting through 200 corrupted wolves." Lyra's mark pulsed, and an idea crystallized, terrible and desperate and possibly suicidal. "I can break their bonds," she said. "All of them. Free them from her control." Thorn's eyes widened. "That nearly killed you last time, and you only broke a few hundred. There's more than that here, and they're already corrupted. It could kill me, yes." Lyra met his gaze. "Or it could end this battle before we lose everyone defending these walls. Your choice, my king. Let me try, or watch your people die." Thorn's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at her with an expression caught between fury and helplessness. Then he pulled her close, his forehead pressing against hers. If you die doing this, he said, his voice rough, I'm coming right after you. Understand? Wherever you go, I follow. That's not how it works. I don't care how it works. His eyes were fierce. You're my mate. My real mate. The only bond I've ever chosen freely. So if you burn yourself out saving these wolves, you better be ready for me to follow, because I'm not living in a world without you in it. Lyra's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that was stupid, that he had a pack to lead, a revolution to guide. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she kissed him, hard and desperate, tasting blood and salt in the fear they were both trying to hide. I love you, she said against his mouth, in case I don't get to say it later. You'll say it later. Thorn's hand cupped the back of her head. You'll say it every day for the rest of our very long lives. Now go save my people so we can start those lives together. He released her, and Lyra turned to face the battle. She could see them clearly now, all the threads connecting Morel's wolves to their master, pulsing with sick green light. Could feel how the bonds had been perverted, twisted from connections of love or loyalty into leashes of pure domination. Lyra closed her eyes and reached for the mark's power. It came easier this time, flowing through her like electricity through copper wire. She felt Thorn's presence beside her through their bond, felt him ready to catch some of the burden if it got too heavy. But this was different from before. These bonds weren't just false. They were diseased. Breaking them would be like lancing infected wounds, and the corruption would try to spread, to infect her in turn. Lyra gritted her teeth and pulled. The first bond snapped, and the corrupted wolf stumbled mid-charge, confusion replacing the fevered rage in its eyes. The second bond broke. The third. The 10th. The 50th. Pain lanced through Lyra's skull as the corruption fought back, trying to crawl up the thread she'd created, trying to infect her mark with Morel's twisted magic. She felt Thorn gasp beside her, felt him shouldering some of the burden through their connection. Together they held, together they pulled, together they fought against the tide of sickness trying to consume them both. Bonds shattered by the dozens, then by the hundreds. On the battlefield, corrupted wolves were dropping to their knees, clutching their heads, screaming as decades of compulsion broke apart and left them hollow and confused. Some collapsed entirely, their minds too damaged by the corruption to survive its removal. Others just stood there, lost, staring at their hands like they'd never seen them before. But Morel felt it too. Lyra heard her scream, a sound of pure fury that cut through the chaos of battle like a blade through silk. No! Morel's voice was inhuman, layered with echoes. Those are mine! You don't get to take them! You don't get to… She moved then, faster than anything human should be able to move. One moment she was at the back of her army. The next she was scaling the fortress wall with claws that dug into solid stone, her white hair streaming behind her like a banner of bone. Lyra! Thorn shoved her behind him, his sword coming up just as Morel reached the rampart. She hit him like a battering ram, her momentum carrying them both backward. They crashed through a wooden support beam, sending splinters flying, and suddenly they were fighting on a narrow walkway with a 30-foot drop on either side. Lyra scrambled to her feet, still pulling at the corrupted bonds, still breaking them as fast as she could. But she could only split her attention so far, and Morel was fast, inhumanly fast, her movements jerky and wrong like a puppet with too many strings. Thorn blocked her strikes, his blade work perfect, but she was driving him back step by step. Every time he landed a hit, every time his sword opened her flesh, the wound sealed almost instantly, her corrupted magic knitting her back together. She's regenerating! Astrid appeared at Lyra's side, her own sword raised. How do we kill something that won't stay dead? We don't kill her, Lyra said, and the truth of it settled cold in her stomach. We save her. Are you insane? She's trying to murder us. She's corrupted, just like her wolves were. Lyra could see it now, see the bonds wrapping around Morel herself. Not connections to other wolves, but self-inflicted chains, magic she'd turned on herself to steal the power of the bonds she consumed. She's been feeding on stolen connections for so long she doesn't remember what real ones feel like. She's hollow, empty, and she thinks taking my mark will fill that emptiness. Then let's enlighten her. Astrid charged forward, joining Thorn in the fight. Together, they were magnificent. Thorn's raw power combined with Astrid's tactical precision, driving Morel back toward the edge of the walkway. But she was laughing now, a broken sound that made Lyra's skin crawl. "You think you can beat me?" Morel's black eyes fixed on Lyra. "I've consumed 1,000 bonds, stolen the connections of entire packs. I'm more powerful than any unmaker has ever been." "You're dying," Lyra said quietly. Morel froze mid-strike, her head tilting at an unnatural angle. "What?" "The corruption. It's eating you from the inside out. I can see it." Lyra moved closer, ignoring Thorn's warning growl. "Those marks on your skin? They're not power. They're cancer. Every bond you steal accelerates the decay. In another year, maybe less, there won't be anything left of you except the magic that's consuming you." "You're lying." "I'm not." Lyra held out her hand, palm up, showing the mark on her own neck. "This is what the power looks like when it's used correctly. When it breaks bonds instead of stealing them. When it frees instead of enslaving. Look at yourself, Morel. Really look. Is that freedom, or is it just a different kind of prison?" Morel's face contorted, emotions flickering across it too fast to track. Rage, fear, desperation. Then her expression smoothed into something terrible and sad. "It doesn't matter," she said. "I'm too far gone to go back. But you're still new, still pure. If I take your mark, absorb your power before the corruption sets in, I can start over. I can do it right this time. Or you can let me help you." Lyra took another step closer. "Let me break the bonds you've wrapped around yourself. Free you from the magic that's killing you. You'll lose the power, yes, but you'll get to live. Get to be yourself again, instead of this twisted thing the elders made you." "They made me a weapon," Morel whispered, "an experiment to see if they could create an unmaker they could control. They broke me into pieces and put me back wrong. And when I finally escaped, when I finally got free, I was already too corrupted to be anything but a monster." "You're not a monster. You're a victim who became a survivor who's about to become a murderer if you don't stop." Lyra's voice was gentle but firm. "I know what it's like to be broken, to be rejected and humiliated and told you're worthless. I know how it feels to want power so badly you'd do anything to get it, but this isn't the answer. Stealing my mark won't fix you. It'll just make you into a worse version of what you already hate." Morel's hands were shaking. "I don't know how to be anything else anymore." "Then learn." Lyra extended her hand farther. "Let me break your bonds. Let me free you. And then we'll figure out who you are when you're not being consumed by stolen magic." For one fragile moment, Lyra thought it might work, thought Morel might take her hand, might choose freedom over power. Then something shifted in those black eyes, something ancient and hungry and beyond reason. "I'm sorry," Morel said, and lunged. She was fast, but Lyra was ready. The mark on her neck flared white-hot, and power exploded outward in a defensive wave. Morel slammed into it like hitting a wall, her momentum reversing, sending her stumbling backward. Right to the edge of the walkway, right to the place where Thorn was waiting. His blade caught her through the chest, driving deep, pinning her against the wooden railing. Morel gasped, blood bubbling on her lips, her eyes going wide with shock. "I'm sorry too," Thorn said quietly. "But I won't let you hurt her." Morel's hands came up to grasp the blade, but she wasn't trying to pull it out. She was holding it there, keeping it in place as she looked at Lyra with an expression that was almost peaceful. "Do it now," she whispered. "While I'm dying, break my bonds. Free me before the corruption takes the last pieces of who I used to be." Lyra didn't hesitate. She reached out with her power, felt the massive tangle of bonds wrapped around Morel's soul, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, all stolen, all corrupted, all slowly killing her, and she pulled. The bond shattered like glass, and Morel screamed, not in pain, but in relief. Lyra felt the corruption drain away, felt the hollow emptiness at Morel's core finally exposed without all the stolen power masking it, felt the woman she'd been before the experiments, before the torture, before the elders broke her and tried to remake her as a weapon, felt her die. Morel slumped forward against Thorn's blade, her white hair falling across her face, her black eyes fading to a soft, natural brown. Her last breath was a sigh, almost content. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she was gone. Thorn pulled his blade free, and Morel's body slid off the walkway, falling to the courtyard below. Around them, the battle had stopped. The corrupted wolves Lyra had freed stood in confused clusters, staring at their hands, touching their necks where the sick green marks had faded to nothing. They looked lost, broken. But they were free. Lyra's legs gave out, and Thorn caught her before she hit the ground. The mark on her neck was burning so hot she could smell singed flesh, and every nerve in her body screamed with exhaustion. "It's done," she whispered. "It's finally done." "Not yet." Thorn lifted her gently, cradling her against his chest. "You still have to survive what you just did, and I still have to figure out how to clean up this mess." Astrid appeared beside them, her face grim. "The corrupted wolves? The ones who survived having their bonds broken, what do we do with them?" Thorn looked out at the courtyard, at the hundreds of confused, traumatized wolves milling about. "We help them," he said firmly. "Same as we're helping the Greythorn refugees. We give them food, shelter, time to heal. Then we give them a choice: stay and help us build something new, or leave and find their own paths. But we don't punish them for what Morel forced them to do." "My king, we don't have the resources." "Then we'll get resources. We'll expand. We'll call on the free packs for aid. We'll do whatever it takes." Thorn's voice was iron. "This is the new order, Astrid. We don't abandon victims. We save them, all of them, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Astrid studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Understood. I'll organize housing and medical care. But Thorn," she paused, "this is going to change everything. The other territories are going to see us taking in refugees, freed wolves, former enemies. They're going to think we're weak, or worse, they're going to think we're building an army. Let them think whatever they want." Thorn's arms tightened around Lyra. "We know the truth. We're building a sanctuary, a place where wolves can be free to choose their own bonds, their own paths, their own lives. And if that threatens the old order, if that scares the elders who are still clinging to their corrupt systems, then good. Let them be afraid, because we're not stopping. This is just the beginning." Lyra listened to him speak, felt the conviction in his voice, and something warm bloomed in her chest despite the pain. This man, this fierce, stubborn king who'd claimed her when no one else would, was choosing her vision of freedom over centuries of tradition, was risking his entire kingdom on the belief that wolves deserved better than slavery disguised as sacred bonds. "I love you," she said again, her voice barely a whisper. Thorn looked down at her, his pale eyes softening. "I know, and I love you, which is why you're going to rest now and let me handle the cleanup. No arguments." "I never argue." "You always argue." His smile was fond. "But you're too exhausted to win this one, so just accept defeat gracefully." Lyra wanted to protest, wanted to stay and help with the refugees and the wounded and all the 1,000 tasks that needed doing. But her body had other ideas. Darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision, exhaustion and blood loss pulling her under. The last thing she saw before consciousness slipped away was Thorn's face, his expression caught between love and fear and absolute determination. She was safe. They were all safe. For now. When Lyra woke, 3 days had passed. She came back to consciousness slowly, awareness returning in fragments. Soft furs beneath her, warmth from a nearby fire, the scent of pine and smoke and something medicinal, and pain, a deep bone-level ache that suggested her body had been through hell and was still recovering. She opened her eyes to find Thorn asleep in a chair beside the bed, his head tilted back at an angle that would probably give him a wicked neck ache when he woke. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his face drawn with stress. But he was there, waiting for her to wake up. Lyra tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her chest. She gasped, and Thorn was awake instantly, his hands on her shoulders, easing her back down. "Don't move," he commanded. "You nearly died. Again. Your body needs time to heal." "How long was I out?" 3 days. The healer said you'd burned through most of your reserves breaking all those corrupted bonds. Said it was a miracle you survived at all." His hand found hers, fingers lacing tight. "You scared the hell out of me, Lyra." "Sorry." Her voice was hoarse. "How bad is it? The aftermath?" Thorn's expression tightened. "Complicated. We've got about 600 refugees now. Greythorn wolves, Morel's freed slaves, wolves fleeing other territories where the revolts are getting bloody. The fortress is packed beyond capacity. We're running low on supplies, tempers are short, and there's been 3 fights already between wolves from different packs." But? But we're managing. Astrid set up a rotation for housing and food distribution. Kael's organized work details to expand the living quarters. And the wolves who've been here longest are starting to help the new arrivals adjust. He paused. It's chaos, but it's productive chaos. People are building something instead of tearing it down. Lyra felt relief wash through her. What about the other territories? The ones still under Elder control? 5 major packs are still intact: Shadowfen, Bloodmoor, Iron Peak, Crestfall, and Silverstream. Their elders have formed a coalition. They're calling it the Preservation Council, and they've declared you a threat to all wolf kind. Thorn's voice was dry. Apparently saving wolves from slavery makes you a terrorist. Are they coming for us? Eventually, but right now they're too busy trying to keep their own territories from imploding. The revolts are spreading, and even packs with intact elder leadership are seeing wolves question their bonds. The system is cracking from within. He smiled grimly. You started something they can't stop, even if they kill you. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. Thorn's thumb traced circles on her palm. But it's the truth. The old order is dying. What comes next, that's up to us. To whether we can build something better before the Preservation Council builds an army big enough to crush us. Lyra absorbed that, her mind already racing despite her exhaustion. They'd won the battle, but the war was just beginning. And she was at the center of it, the Unmaker, the woman who could destroy any bond with a thought, the living weapon that every elder would want dead or controlled. I need to get up, she said. Need to help. You need to rest. Thorn's voice was firm. The refugees are settled, the defenses are solid, and Astrid has everything under control. You rest and heal. That's an order from your king. You're not my king. I'm your mate. That's better. He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And your mate is telling you to stop trying to save everyone for 5 goddamn minutes and let someone take care of you for once. Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was fine, that she didn't need coddling, that there was too much work to be done. But the warmth of his hand in hers, the steadiness of his presence, the utter exhaustion in her bones, all of it combined to drain the fight out of her. Fine, she conceded, but only for today. Tomorrow I'm getting up and helping whether you like it or not. We'll see. Thorn settled back in his chair, his hand never leaving hers. Now go back to sleep. I'll be here when you wake up. You should rest too. You look terrible. Flattery will get you everywhere. But he smiled, and some of the tension eased from his face. I'll rest, once I'm sure you're actually asleep and not plotting how to sneak out of bed the moment I close my eyes. I would never. You absolutely would. He squeezed her hand. Sleep, Lyra. Please. For me. She wanted to stay awake, wanted to keep talking, wanted to plan for all the challenges ahead. But her body had other ideas. And within minutes, she was drifting off again, Thorn's steady breathing beside her like a lullaby. The weeks that followed were a blur of slow healing and careful rebuilding. Lyra's body mended gradually, the mark on her neck settling into something stable instead of the burning chaos it had been. She could still feel the bonds around her, the real ones forming between wolves who'd chosen each other freely, the tentative connections of refugees finding their place in the new order. It was beautiful and messy and complicated, and Lyra had never been happier. The fortress expanded. New structures rose from cleared forest, housing the influx of wolves fleeing the chaos in the southern territories. Astrid organized them with military efficiency, creating work details, training rotations, community kitchens that served wolves from a dozen different packs side by side. There were problems. Fights broke out regularly between wolves with old pack rivalries. Resources strained to the breaking point. Wolves struggled to adjust to freedom after decades of controlled bonds, and more than a few had breakdowns when the weight of choice became too heavy. But they persevered. 6 months after Morel's death, Lyra stood on the newly expanded ramparts and watched the sun rise over a settlement that had tripled in size. Smoke rose from cook fires. Children played in the courtyard. Children born to false bonds who were now being raised by parents learning to love honestly. Wolves moved between buildings with purpose, building and repairing and growing. It's not perfect, Thorn said, coming up beside her, but it's ours. Lyra leaned into his warmth. Have you heard from the scouts? Any movement from the Preservation Council? They're still arguing among themselves. Shadowfen wants to attack immediately. Bloodmoor wants to negotiate. Iron Peak is trying to keep the coalition together while also dealing with a revolt in their eastern settlements. Thorn's arm wrapped around her waist. They'll come eventually, but not yet. We have time. Time for what? To get stronger, to grow, to show the other territories that freedom works better than slavery. He paused. And to prepare for what comes next. What does come next? Thorn was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. Then he said, I've been thinking. The Preservation Council is going to keep existing as long as there are elders profiting from the bond system. We can defend against their attacks, sure, but defense isn't victory. Eventually, we'll need to go on the offensive. You mean go after them directly? I mean offer every wolf in every territory the same choice we've given the refugees here. Freedom or slavery. Real bonds or false ones. Let them decide and support them when they choose to break free. His voice was firm. We don't conquer the territories. We liberate them. Lyra felt something shift in her chest, hope and fear mixing into something that tasted like destiny. That's ambitious, dangerous, probably impossible. So was surviving what we've already been through. Thorn turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face. But we did it. You did it. You broke a system that had existed for generations. You freed hundreds of wolves. You survived the corruption, the battles, the mark trying to burn you alive. If you can do all that, we can do this too. We, Lyra repeated. You keep saying we, Ismia, because that's what this is, you and me, together, not just mates, but partners, equals, building something better than what came before. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I can't do this without you, Lyra. I don't want to. So, will you? Will you stand beside me and help me tear down the old order and build something real in its place? Lyra searched his face, seeing the hope and determination and love written there. This man who'd claimed her when she was broken, who'd shared the burden of her power when it threatened to destroy her, who'd chosen her vision of freedom over everything else. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll stand with you, for as long as it takes. Thorn's smile was blinding. He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise, and Lyra felt the bond between them pulse warm and real and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, Astrid was standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, her expression amused. If you two are done making declarations of eternal devotion, we have a situation that needs your attention. What kind of situation? Thorn asked. The good kind, for once. Astrid's smile was small but genuine. 3 more packs just sent envoys. They want to join our coalition. They're calling it the Free Alliance, and they want you both to lead it. Lyra's breath caught. 3 more packs? That's momentum, Thorn finished. That's proof that what we're doing works. That wolves want freedom more than they want the security of false bonds. So what do we tell them? Astrid asked. Thorn looked at Lyra, his eyebrows raised in question. She thought about everything they'd been through. The rejection, the pain, the battles, the deaths. Thought about the hundreds of wolves now living free because she'd refused to accept slavery disguised as sacred tradition. Thought about the thousands more still trapped in false bonds, waiting for someone to show them another way. We tell them yes, Lyra said. We tell them we're building an alliance of free packs. And we tell them we won't stop until every wolf in every territory has the right to choose their own bonds, their own mates, their own lives. Even if it means war with the Preservation Council? Astrid pressed. Especially then, Lyra's voice was steady, because some things are worth fighting for. Freedom is one of them. Astrid's smile widened. Good answer. I'll send word to the envoys. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't die. Both of you. The pack needs you. The Free Alliance needs you. And she hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across her face. I need you. To show me it's possible to rebuild after being broken. To prove that freedom is worth the pain of learning who you really are. Then she was gone, leaving Lyra and Thorn alone on the ramparts. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the settlement wake up below them. Wolves emerged from buildings, stretching, greeting each other, starting their days with choices instead of compulsion. Do you ever regret it? Thorn asked quietly. Coming here? Claiming me as your mate? Starting this whole revolution? Lyra thought about Greythorn, about standing in that bonding circle while everyone watched her humiliation, about Cade's rejection and the hollow emptiness that had followed, about the woman she'd been, broken, isolated, convinced she was worthless because no one had chosen her. Then she thought about who she was now. The unmaker, the woman who'd shattered a corrupt system, the maid of a king who valued her strength instead of being threatened by it, the leader of a movement that was spreading across territories like wildfire. No, she said honestly, I don't regret any of it, even the painful parts, even the parts that nearly killed me, because all of it led here, to this moment, to you, to a future where wolves can be free. Thorn pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. Good, because I don't regret it either. Best impulsive decision I ever made, claiming you. It wasn't that impulsive. You needed proof against the council. I needed you, he corrected. I just didn't know it yet. Didn't know that the woman standing alone in that bonding circle would turn out to be exactly what I'd been missing. What the whole damn world had been missing. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. I have a reputation to maintain. But his arms tightened around her. Though maybe in private I can be a little less kingly and a little more devoted. I'd like that. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, painting the settlement in gold and amber light. Somewhere below, a child laughed. Somewhere else, wolves were arguing about work assignments, life continuing in all its messy, beautiful, complicated glory. This was what freedom looked like, Lyra realized. Not perfection, not some utopian vision where everyone got along and nothing ever went wrong. Just wolves making choices, living with consequences, building connections based on truth instead of magic. It was hard. It was painful. It required constant work and vigilance and the willingness to fail and try again. But it was real. And real was worth fighting for. The years that followed tested them in ways Lyra couldn't have imagined. The Free Alliance grew, adding more pacts as the revolt spread and elders fell. But the Preservation Council fought back with everything they had: armies, assassins, propaganda campaigns designed to paint Lyra as a monster destroying the sacred bonds. There were battles, losses. Wolves died defending the freedom to choose their own paths. Lyra had to break corrupted bonds over and over, each time risking the mark consuming her, each time relying on Thorn to share the burden and pull her back from the edge. But slowly, inexorably, the tide turned. 5 years after that first night in Greythorn, the last major elder stronghold fell. Shadowfen's council was overthrown by their own wolves, the false bonds shattered, the corrupt system finally, truly destroyed. The territories were free, not perfect, not unified, but free to choose, free to fail, free to build whatever they wanted from the ashes of the old order. And Lyra, the woman who'd been rejected as worthless, who'd been marked as an abomination, who'd nearly died a dozen times breaking the chains that bound her people, stood on the same sacred ground where her journey had begun and felt peace settle into her bones. Thorn stood beside her, their hands clasped, their bond marks gleaming in the moonlight. Around them, wolves from a dozen territories had gathered, not for a bonding ritual dictated by elders, but for a celebration of everything they'd built together. I'm stepping down, Lyra said quietly, so only Thorn could hear. His head whipped toward her. What? As leader of the Free Alliance, as the Unmaker, as... She gestured at the gathered wolves. All of it. I'm stepping down. Why? Because the work is done. The false bonds are broken. The system is destroyed. What comes next? Rebuilding, governing, figuring out how free packs work together? That's not my strength. That's yours. Astrid's. The Council's. Lyra met his eyes. I was made to break things, Thorn. And I did. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life being a weapon. I want to be just Lyra, your mate. A wolf who gets to live without the weight of destiny on her shoulders. Thorn stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not fighting or breaking bonds or leading revolutions. She squeezed his hand. You could come with me. Leave the kingship to Astrid. She'd be better at it anyway. She would, Thorn agreed. She's been running the day-to-day for years while we've been focused on the war. The transition would be smooth. So, he pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. So let's do it. Let's disappear into the wilderness and be nobody special for a while. Let's figure out what it means to be mates when we're not constantly fighting for survival. Lyra felt joy bubble up in her chest, bright and effervescent. Really? You'd give up being king? I'd give up anything for you. Thorn's voice was fierce. You know that by now. I know, but it's nice to hear. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the celebration continued around them. Tomorrow they would make the announcement. Tomorrow they would start the process of handing power to Astrid and the council. Tomorrow they would begin planning their departure. But tonight they just held each other and watched the wolves they'd freed build something beautiful from the rubble of the old world. 3 months later, Lyra and Thorn stood at the edge of Free Alliance territory, looking out at the wildlands beyond. They carried nothing but what they could fit in packs, owned nothing but each other, and had no destination in mind except away. Last chance to change your mind, Lyra said. We could stay, keep leading, keep building. We could, Thorn agreed. But I don't want to. I want this, you, me, the open road. No expectations, no responsibilities, just freedom. Just freedom, Lyra echoed, and the words tasted like honey. They walked into the wilderness hand in hand, leaving behind the legend of the Unmaker and the Northern King, leaving behind the titles and the duties and the weight of all they'd accomplished. Behind them, the Free Alliance thrived. Astrid ruled with wisdom and strength. The councils governed with transparency, and wolves across the territories learned to live with choice instead of compulsion. Some found true bonds. Some didn't. Some made mistakes and had to live with the consequences. Some built beautiful lives from the freedom they'd been given. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And somewhere in the wild places where no one knew their names or their history, two wolves who'd changed the world walked together through the forest, their bond strong and true and chosen, and finally, just lived. No thrones, no chains, no destiny. Just love, just choice, just freedom. And that was enough.